So what's going on with Elder Scrolls 6? For a game that's a long ways off, I can't help but notice my video feed is full of a lot of concern and worry about the game. After Starfield, I myself expressed concern about Todd Howard and the team at Bethesda being able to bring a game to the market that was not just large in scope, but a game that would feel like it was from today and not 10 years ago. Now, Todd claimed in interviews things that caused me concern before Starfield even came out, like that 30 FPS was fine when he did the Lex Friedman interview. They lifted systems directly from Fallout, making Starfield feel more like a dated Fallout in space, more than like a truly new and innovative game. And the question would be is, are they going to continue that trend with Elder Scrolls 6? Is it going to feel sort of like a game out of time? And about 2 weeks ago, a video from Epic Nate made the rounds, clocking in over 1 million views by now. And in it, he outlines concerns, worrying reports, things that people are hearing about this game, and it starts with the company culture. And Todd Howard had an increase in workload over the years. There's less hands-on with development from their lead designers. There's a pretty big broken promise to somebody who would have been leading the design for Elder Scrolls 6. There's interviews even suggesting that the development of Elder Scrolls 6 did not start until late 2023, or maybe even as late as early 2024. And due to that broken promise, a very strong narrative and a lot of potential was potentially shelved, all capstoned by the uncertainty about where the game is even going to take place. There's been interviews where they're basically saying they don't even actually know, where in Tamriel the game is going to be. Now, I've pulled this from a bunch of different videos. I thought it would be fun to react to Epic Nate's video, but also look at all the other vids that are out there about Elder Scrolls 6, what it means for us, what it means for you. Is the game doomed? Is Bethesda going to be able to bring a game that will be able to stand right now? I even watched another video this morning. YouTube likes to do that, right? I watch videos from all these guys, and it starts suggesting videos to me about Elder Scrolls 6. And this was a creator I'd never heard of before, and he made such a good point about how gamers of today are going to compare Skyrim to games from today. I'll play the clip for you later. He basically referenced how, he was speaking to somebody younger than him, a relative or something, and he said, yeah, I got my start covering, games like Skyrim or something like that. And the person was like, I don't know what that is, but I know what Elden Ring is. And basically, the younger generation is going to be sort of unfamiliar with the greatness that is Skyrim or Oblivion or Morrowind or whatever your opinions are. They're going to be thinking about Elden Ring or, games from now that are considered the new standard for either like an open world game or an RPG. And I thought that was just such a good way of putting it. Gamers of today, or when Elder Scrolls finally comes out, gamers of that time are going to compare it to games from that time. You can't keep doing this, well, it's better than previous Bethesda games thing. There's other people that I watch as well, and we're going to look at some of those clips. Mugthief discussed unrealistic expectations. LegacyKillaHD talked about the lack of dedicated writers, but also the engine itself and the history of buggy launches. MrMattyPlays calls into question the release cadence and the choices, and why we're waiting all this time is because of some poor decisions. What does that actually mean for Elder Scrolls 6 when it finally lands? So as it stands, there's a lot of rumblings. There's a lot of worries out there. We're going to look at the clips, the statements, and just kind of have a back and forth. There's even a recent article about Morrowind and how, somebody was basically saying it would not stand the test of time. If you did a remake or a remaster today, it would feel very dated. And that's kind of the concern, is you can make a game look incredible. I mean, the point the guy made in the video I watched this morning was that a lot of people that were unfamiliar with Oblivion weren't all that impressed by the remake because they had no nostalgic attachment to it. So to them, it was a very good-looking but very old game behind all those pretty updates. This is directly tied to the idea that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to need to transcend former design tropes and methods used by Bethesda. That can be very difficult when you're building a game of this scope and size. It's like an aircraft carrier. A lot of the schematic, a lot of the scaffolding and the bones are going to be easier to build if you just sort of lean on things you've done before, because the scope and size of the game is probably going to be pretty significant. Now, before we start reacting to videos and clips, I want to know what you guys think. Obviously, if you're watching this later, leave a comment below. I'm going to be chatting, I'm sure, with the audience today about this, but does Bethesda have what it takes to deliver in this way? Do they have what it takes to deliver the way that Elder Scrolls 6 needs to land? I continue to feel that Fallout 76 and Starfield are maybe the beginning of a worrying pattern. And I know people try to handwave 76 and say it was a different team. It's really difficult to handwave Starfield. Even this morning, watched a guy who went back to Starfield after all this time and just still felt very much like the game has not really risen above the claims that it just doesn't feel like a game from today. So, what do you think, chat? Let's talk about this. And I just realized I did not change the title or the outgoing notification for Twitch. That's my bad. Is Elder Scrolls 6 doomed? Oops. Anyways, everybody's probably having deja vu. They're like, huh? What? Ashes of Creation? Didn't we talk about this yesterday? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Go through the ritual of hitting the like button on YouTube. And Gangs is going to kick things off with the VIP renewal. That's a lot of months. That's 58 months. Thank you, Gangs. He says, life's a garden. Dig it. Thank you very, very much. I was very confused. Tuesdays are tough for me. I have to help the family get out the door, so I'm always a little bit frazzled and a little bit, like, out of sorts when I come down here. So I was a little bit, like, I was scrambling a bit. So Twitch got the old title. I believe they can, but I love Starfield and play nearly every day. Can't wait to get my hands on Elder Scrolls. And Wired Rope's going to kick things off with a 5-bomb over there for Twitch. Trundling along here as we get close to being on pace from yesterday. If you guys unlock that Saturday stream, Madam has to react to gaming news. It's a fun time whenever we have to do that. Starfield was the first Bethesda game I actually enjoyed and finished. It felt by the end a next-gen Mass Effect. Really? You thought that highly of it? I was starting to turn a corner with Starfield, and then I played Phantom Liberty. And the guy I watched this morning, he literally said that. He said, you know, it launched around the time, you know, it was in between like Baldur's Gate 3 and Phantom Liberty, and a lot of people were like, you know, this just doesn't cut it. And that's kind of what happened to me. I have since not been able to go back to it. I go back to it, I'm just like, yeah, I don't think there's anything here that appeals to me. Crimson Desert destroys Elder Scrolls 6. Here's the interesting thing about Crimson Desert. I watched a video this morning by Josh Strife Hayes that helped me understand the Crimson Desert people. There are people that are already so gung-ho, just head over heels, defense force about Crimson Desert. Anytime I've covered it, anytime I've tried to point out potential problems, these people, they come to the comments, they come to the chat, and they're like, you're hating, this game's going to be amazing. And Josh Strife Hayes opened my eyes this morning. He said, and he was talking about something completely different. He was talking about the Ashes of Creation situation and why these MMORPGs always end up getting support and why people are always so excited. And he said that the reason this happens is because the game's not out and it's just a dream. And in the dream, it can be perfect. It has no flaws yet. It has no rough edges. And it becomes sacred, and people will tend to defend it or you know, pine for it in a way that makes them bristle at anybody who's a doubter, anybody who's a skeptic, anybody who's critical. And man, oh man, when he said that, I was like, that makes perfect sense why these conversations go the way that they go. I watch a trailer for something like Mind's Eye, The Day Before, Fable, or more recently Crimson Desert. I point out what I feel like are red flags, and people get very defensive. And now I understand. The game isn't out yet. It's a dream at that point. It has all the potential in the world. It's at some level, at that moment, it's perfect. It can have no flaws. It can't disappoint you yet. It's in its best possible state. So people defend it because they feel like I'm shattering the dream. I'm ruining the illusion. I'm being a hater, a doomer. I think that is such just a bullseye from Josh Strife Hayes about why these conversations go the way that they go. Why people would be willing to sort of fund an MMORPG and defend it to the death, even when there's worrying signs or problems. And then they move on to the next thing. And I think that's why the hype cycle and the marketing cycle for games is so dangerous, because that's essentially what they're doing is they're selling you a dream. The product is there, but they're selling you this dream about like what you're going to experience. For whatever reason, they started a hype train over there on Purple. If you guys are going to go crazy, now's the time. If you're watching on YouTube, quickly make sure and hit that like button. We're about 10 minutes into the show already. Let's get those first 100 likes. Want to delete Bethesda? I don't know why you would delete Bethesda. I think they can certainly still do good things. I just the worry and the concern is stacking up. I started watching these videos from all these guys, and I'm like, yeah, I get why this is in my feed. It's all over my feed. It's just, that's all I see. It's Matty, it's Mugthief, it all. I think Epic Nate kind of kicked the whole thing off with his video. I think we're going to start there. I was that way with Vampire Bloodlines too, but it was very clear a month before release it was not the game I was dreaming for, and in the end, I never bought it. I'll be honest, says Edward says, as a 40-year-old gamer, Bethesda games even felt dated back when they were popular. They've always been enjoyable to me. To me, it's interesting that I remember even when Fallout 4 came out, I remember people taking issue with the engine, and because I didn't really have a history with the company, I was like, I think the game is great. What's the problem? Eugene says, Elder Scrolls 6 is so far away, it shouldn't be on anyone's radar one way or another. Well, we're going to take a look at these videos today, Eugene, and I think you're going to start to see why the concern is mounting from long-standing Bethesda fans especially, because they're going to be the first ones to be like, yeah, there's a history here. There are games, there are patterns, there are interviews, there are people on staff that are a cause for concern for the game's future. I mean, I said even before this conversation started, I forget when I said it, I said I think Todd Howard is the biggest potential barrier for Elder Scrolls to be amazing when he was doing those interviews about Starfield, and he was saying stuff that just felt so out of touch. It was just like, man, I don't feel like you're in the modern landscape right now. You're talking about 30 FPS, like, yeah, we're okay with that. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, what other decisions are you okay with? What other systems are you okay with feeling, dated, out of place? And then we played Starfield and we saw, like, well, you're basically okay with all of it feeling sort of out of place. It felt very much like one-to-one systems were lifted directly from Fallout. It would be like me worried about RE10. I don't agree. They're doing interviews about it right now, so I think what you're saying is not a fair comparison. If Capcom was doing interviews right now about RE10, and we had staff movements and we're hearing bad things about culture shift at the company, it would make sense for you to be like, yeah, I don't know, man, RE9 might be the last good Resident Evil we get. All these bad things are happening over there. That's why these videos are being made. There's interviews, there's developments at the company, there's things people are coming out and saying about Bethesda. Also, it would make perfectly good sense for you to be worried about RE10 if RE9 comes out and is a stinker. I don't think it's going to be a stinker. I'm looking forward to it, but like, Starfield is kind of the precursor to all of this. I think Starfield and the Shattered Space DLC, I think that was the crack in the surface. That planted all these seeds of doubt. And I think all those seeds of doubt are starting to grow and take hold because now we're hearing more. We're hearing about broken promises. We're hearing about a culture shift. We're hearing about, the design leads don't have hands-on like they used to. It's very bureaucratic. Like, we're hearing all these things. If Starfield was amazing and like award-winning and earth-shattering, I think people would dismiss all this. They'd be like, yeah, Bethesda's clearly fine. I think what people are hearing now is being turned into like a retroactive lens. People are like turning and looking at Starfield and being like, yeah, everything we're hearing makes perfectly good sense as to why this game turned out the way that it did. It'd be like you worrying about RE10 if RE7, 8, and 9 were as bad as RE Boulder Punch scene. That's the point, right? This isn't coming out of left field for some studio that's been like crushing it. It's coming out for a studio that's had some pretty big swings and misses and some lapses in judgment. And then we're hearing from former employees and interviews and rumblings about what's going on. Bethesda has not updated their philosophy, and they continue to make games like they're in the PS2 era. It's interesting to think about. It's really interesting to think about that. I think it was Synth Potato put out a tweet this morning, and he was like, what's the most disappointing game for you this gen? And he put Doom the Dark Ages. And a bunch of people were replying, and a lot of the replies were sequels. And my reply was a sequel. Like, my biggest disappointment this gen was Hellblade 2. Just absolutely one of the biggest regressions I think I've ever seen in a sequel, ever. Like, and I played a lot of sequels recently. You know, Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Ghost of Yotei. You know, Soros is basically a spiritual sequel to Returnal. There's a lot of sequels that I played. And that was, you know, one of the most regressives. And I wonder if sometimes that's the dilemma, is it's hard to outdo your, you know, you see this all the time with like comedians and bands, right? Like, they have all this time to curate the album or the act that gets them known, and now they're expected to do it again. And it's like, well, that took us 10 years of, you know, writing and practicing and reworking things, you know, and now now I'm popular, so now I got to do it again. I think in similar ways, the way that like games come to the market, we go back and look and we're like, man, these games were tectonic. They were so incredible. And I think sometimes it's like, well, we can't do all that again. We can't completely detonate and reinvent or make seismic changes to like what an open world RPG can be. You know, we've kind of got to use what we know and do what we know, use the systems that we've already built. And when you do that, you tend to have a game that like you look beyond the veneer of the marketing and you're like, yeah, this game feels like it's from another time. The point I'm trying to make is it doesn't make sense or do any good for someone to be worried or excited about a game that's 4 years or more away. Okay, I appreciate that contribution. Do you think Bethesda decided to rebuild Elder Scrolls after Starfield flopped because it was going to use the same engine? It's hard to know. Like, it's hard to know. That's been the number one question for many people. Can they look at the engine and make what, you know, the changes that are needed to get it to where a game needs to feel? I personally think FromSoft is dealing with similar issues with their engine. It's like, can these engines that you guys have been using all this time, can they transcend where we are now? Can you make a game, you know, that doesn't feel like something that we played a long, long time ago? This is one of the reasons why when we talk about like remakes and remasters, and I look at a game and I'm like, if it's old enough, I don't want a remaster. It's going to feel like a game from back then, and I'm not really looking to play games from back then. Like, I played the GoldenEye on my Xbox for like 20 minutes, and I was like, that was a fun trip down memory lane, and that was about all I needed. Yo, it's good feed. I see you in the chat. I think they very much have changed parts of their game philosophy. I don't think they actually understand why Skyrim was so successful and why people keep playing it. Well, and that's another problem too. It's I think it's related. It's a very different scenario, but Josh Strife Hayes was talking about why it's so difficult to get MMOs off the ground, because there are people that just kind of go back home. They just have a game where like, this is where I live, this is what's familiar to me. You know, EverQuest 1 was never outdone by EverQuest 2. He gives examples like that, right? I'm not the expert in MMO, he is, and I'm just sort of paraphrasing. And I wonder if sometimes that's another problem, is that people are like, yeah, I've played Skyrim, I've lived in Skyrim for you know, a decade, and I don't know if you're ever going to be able to recapture that in a new game. I don't know if you're, you know, people are probably hesitant to think that they can definitely do it again. Who's this person you mentioned? I mean, just a moment ago I mentioned Josh Strife Hayes. He's a very big YouTuber. I think he's close to 1 million subscribers. He covers MMORPGs. He's always done well. I think he kind of exploded with his Diablo Immortal video. Not Immortal, but Immoral. He basically took Diablo Immortal to task, and the video like blew up, and I think that really catapulted him. I think he was already doing very well for himself, but I think that one really put him into the stratosphere of like growth. His channel is huge. What's their engine called again? Yeah, Creative Engine. And there were rumors, rumblings, and people saying that, like, you know, Creation 2.0 was coming, and, you know, that it was going to be significant changes for Starfield. I just don't see any evidence of that. I still see all of the things that you kind of look and feel and see in Fallout. I didn't see, like, a game that... It just doesn't feel like a game from today. I thought the guy that made that point... I watched a video this morning, and he said... he was talking about how like he was talking to somebody from the younger generation, and he mentioned Skyrim, and they're like, I don't know what that is. And they asked him about Elden Ring. And he said, gamers from today will compare your game to games from today. So if you're going to make a game, then I think that's one of the reasons that Starfield just didn't land with a lot of people. Is if you spend like an hour or two in the game, you're like, it honestly feels like a remaster of like if there was like a Fallout game where you went to space. It kind of feels that way. It's like this is basically Fallout 5 in space. Like it does not feel like a game from today. Skyrim becoming a forever game changed Bethesda. They keep trying to make an RPG that can be their next 10-year game. Fallout 4 said this, Starfield said this, their design philosophy shifted. I think that is one of the more interesting developments about Starfield. As you go back, and there were a handful of interviews where like Todd was talking about supporting the game for like the long term, like a long horizon. I don't see that happening. I mean, unless this alleged Starfield 2.0 thing lands, and if it's real, and it would have to be absolutely seismic. It would have to be absolutely seismic for people to feel like, oh yeah, this is such a different game now. I think Bethesda knows that they're going to have a very hard time beating Skyrim, which is pretty self-aware. Well, I think this is one of the reasons like we haven't seen a Portal 3 or a Half-Life 3. I think people are there's one thing to be like, the whole victim of success thing, which is kind of a meme but also kind of true. But I also think you can be scared of your own achievements. You have a bestseller or an award-winning movie, or in this case, you have a game that is considered one of the most impactful games out there. People will claim, well, no, Morrowind was better, or Oblivion was better, or more influential. I think for many people, if you look at the history of gaming and the history of RPGs, history of open world games, many people would look to Skyrim and say it is one of the most influential games in the history of games. Like, it's basically that time period's Zelda, kind of. Like, there were games like Zelda that made people think completely differently about like what a video game could be, especially Zelda on the original Nintendo is such an achievement within the realm of you can go and explore, and it's not like on paper. It's not point and click. Like, that was a significant, I think, impact on what you could do in a video game. Similarly, I think Skyrim lands and people start to think differently about what a game can be. It can be this giant open space. And you're like, yeah, but the previous games did that. I know, but to the degree that Skyrim was experienced and seen, you wouldn't have Zelda without Skyrim. I think you typed that backwards. I think what you meant to say is you wouldn't have Skyrim without Zelda. So, what's your statement about this in the U.S.? My statement is you don't get to talk about that here. Like, we don't talk about that. Your account's new. You followed me 2 seconds ago, and you bring up politics. My statement is you're banned. That's my statement. I highly doubt you're here in good faith. You don't have to beat Skyrim to release a good product. Well, Half-Life 3 is actually going to be built by people that wanted to make it industry-changing and have support to do so, versus Bethesda that does not have support to do what they want. What do you mean by that, Butters? What do you mean they don't have the support to do what they want? Luke Stevens heard that the supposed 2.0 for Starfield isn't meant to garner new players, but convince previous players to come back. I'm thinking Starfield isn't going to have its Phantom Liberty moment. Oh, Typhoon, you meant no Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom without Skyrim. I think I could agree with that. But you got to put some respect on Zelda's name. I mean, I don't think you have a Skyrim without an Ocarina of Time. At some level, I don't know if you have a Breath of the Wild without an Ocarina of Time. I feel like those are more related, but I definitely think Skyrim had that impact on the idea of like what an open world could be. Exploratory purpose, density of the map, what feels like emergent gameplay, Super Googly with Super Chat says, this is the exact reason why I compare Nintendo games to games on other platforms. despite the inferior hardware, rather than propping them up because of bad graphics. Right, but I think the problem with that, Googly, is you were attempting to compare games from a previous generation console, essentially. The Switch 1 came out in 2017. That's why I always found your argumentation to be completely lacking. Like, that would be like pointing to PS4 versions of games and trying to claim that Sony developers don't know how to make games that feel like they're from today. That would be really underhanded, would it not? If you're like, yeah, look at Horizon Forbidden West running at 30 FPS. These guys clearly don't know what they're doing. It's like you're looking at the previous gen version. You know, looking at Switch 1, you know, if you look at the Switch 2 and you play the updated versions of Zelda and you play Mario Kart or Donkey Kong, I think they hold their own. They do. They don't have like photorealistic graphics and ray tracing, but I think they hold their own. I think they're very solid games. I would put Donkey Kong alongside and adjacent to Astrobot. I think Astrobot looks and runs a little bit better, but by and large, I would put those two in very similar hemispheres of they're enjoyable, they're well built, they're very big games. There's so much to do in both games. I don't know. Ubisoft, how you see something you can do in the open world Zelda? I would definitely think that Toldar's right. I would think some of the things in Breath of the Wild certainly came from the Ubisoft open world format, like climbing the towers, doing the shrines, going up to like prefab little towns, villages that have enemies, and then there's loot to gather. I mean, I don't know. That is a little bit more Ubisoft than Bethesda. You know, Bethesda went for more of a world that felt handcrafted, not formulaic. I think that's why people love Skyrim. It didn't feel like, oh, here is another town. Oh, here is another tower. It literally feels like this genuine world where I'm going to explore this because it's not prefab. It's not an asset flip. It's this giant thing that if I find a cave, that cave is here for a reason. And that reason is for me to go inside and look and you know, get killed by a Draugr. Let's not discount the physics and systems and Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, which are all well past many games. Donkey Kong's great stress release therapy. Just smash everything. That's right. Spice King says, I respect his commitment. Man's a professional hater. Yeah, he really doesn't like Nintendo. What's good, Ruluk here? How are you? God bless you and your family. Thank you. Uncharted 4 on the PS4 looks better than a lot of new games. Yeah, Naughty Dog's always, you know, deserved a pretty good amount of respect for being ahead of the curve. You know, their games are very, very, I think, they age better than most games because they felt like time travelers. It was like, how did you guys do this? I mean, there was internal communications where like Phil Spencer said that Naughty Dog's doing stuff we're not even close to that. Basically, like, these guys are ahead. Like, and I think you can see it in games like Uncharted and The Last of Us. They were always... I think that's why a lot of these studios were very willing and wanting their games to go to PC, because when you're ahead of the curve, you want to see that performance get that bump. You want to see the better frame rate and the better resolution. It's a better way for your game to be experienced. Bethesda formula is outdated and lacks depth. Zero consequences for anything. No branching storyline. Stiff robotic soulless NPCs. Stiff melee combat animation. And those are from the top of my head. I just bought my daughter Donkey Kong Bonanza, and she's really enjoying it. It's really, really fun. It really, really is. And if she ever... I don't know how old she is. If she ever needs help, you can ride along as the second character, and you can really help. It got ridiculous. I actually had to finish Donkey Kong Bonanza by myself. I didn't enjoy it. I was playing it with Madam, and Madam was like having a 50 cal machine gun on my shoulder. She's just like just killing everything. I was like, this isn't fun, babe. She's 9. Yeah, well, you could certainly help. Yeah, ride along if she gets stuck in a fight or a challenge or something. Skyrim was a generation appropriate update to Oblivion. Oblivion was a gen appropriate update to Morrowind. So what should Elder Scrolls 6 be? I think that is so concisely said, and just spot on. Yes, you're like, yeah, that's what it should be. It should be a generation appropriate game. It should feel like it's from today. What are you saying here, Butters? Let's see. At Valve, devs are told to work on whatever is catching their interest. Take your time, and if it stops feeling right, don't keep going. At Bethesda, you are a workhorse with one person who makes decisions. And Butters also said, no team of individuals at Bethesda, just a team that's given a 1/10 of the info that Todd and the management want them to hold. Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into a lot of these claims, Butters, about the bureaucracy and the leadership and the structure over there at Bethesda. That's one of the concerns we're hearing from people, is that, you know, the setup at the company itself has gone in the direction that's really unhelpful. So we went from like, hey, where's the game coming, to like criticism from people about like, man, you did 76 and then you did Starfield, and Starfield like wasn't even that good. To now we have some meat for the bones. It's like, oh, this is what's been going on. You know what I mean? What's good, Freddie Jackson? The hilarious thing is they know they have to nail Elder Scrolls 6. Organic Lou says, I can't support Nintendo anymore with how little effort they put into the Pokemon games because they know kids will always buy the slop. I think that it's fair to not buy Pokemon games, but to be like, well, I'm not going to support Nintendo. I mean, I guess that's your choice. That's a little far-reaching. I mean, right now, I'm waiting for Nintendo to drop a mainline Mario and a mainline Zelda. Like, my wife and I went back and enjoyed Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. They weren't the best ports, especially when you had to use the motion controls. That was pretty tilting because it didn't respond very well. It was like basically a lot of luck because it just the motion controls didn't seem to work properly. And I don't remember having that hard of a time on the Nintendo Wii. I'm playing Beast of Reincarnation 1000%. Well, we heard allegedly they outsourced a lot of that work. So Game Freak didn't like just suddenly build. They didn't just suddenly build a combat system that looked that good, you know, out of nowhere. That kind of came out of nowhere. It was like, how'd you guys build this? You've never done this before. This combat's looking kind of good. Like, how'd y'all pull this off? Broken says, is that why I love Morrowind so much? I was actually mad that Oblivion got a remaster first when they said that they don't think they can refresh Morrowind, and now I'm mad again. Yeah, the contention was, and this is obviously, I think, very related to the Elder Scrolls 6. The contention was Morrowind wouldn't stand the test of time, basically. Like, you could make it look really, really pretty, but people would be like, yeah, this is no good. Like, this is an old game. And the point that the guy made in the video I watched this morning, he was like, a lot of people didn't enjoy Oblivion for that reason. They felt like, well, yeah, it's pretty. You guys made it look good. Now, there were performance issues at launch, which is never good for a remake because those are kind of the thing that you don't want to see in a remake. You're like expecting the remake to be polished and good and pretty and not, you know, having issues. And so, you know, if you got past that, there were still people that were like, this just doesn't feel like a game from today. Bethesda seemed to build their stories like they can't have heavy impacting consequences as future content drops need to be able to fit into any choice that the player makes. Well, it doesn't have to fit. It doesn't. I mean, I think you could make long-lasting impact with story, and you could have, you know, like, hey, you can't interact with this group now because you made this choice. And then when the new content comes out, you'd have to have branching elements within it so that you could say, oh, this guy made this group of people really mad, so now when you come to play the DLC, these will be the ramifications of what you did. You almost have to, it's almost like connecting one spider web to another. There have to be touch points. Even if those touch points are, oh no, yeah, you can't do this new quest line. You have to do this other quest line that we added. There, you know, and I think that's incredibly difficult. I think that's easier said than done to have thousands of permutations of playthroughs and like what somebody could do or not do. And then when you try to add content onto that, you're going to have people that are like, well, I played peaceful and I liked these people and I factioned with these people. And now this content comes in and it's really, really probably hard to have that content built for all those variety of choices and decisions that the player has made. It's not as simple as like you play through a game like Detroit Become Human and there's like branching options and branching endings and all of that's built in a very sort of like mathematical flowchart way, which works within the confines of that. Trying to do that within an open world RPG is probably significantly more difficult. Highguard will be more relevant than Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, I think the Elder Scrolls 6 has a 20 million viewed trailer that says otherwise. I think that's an absurd claim. There's not a universe where Elder Scrolls comes out and isn't relevant. Now, if it's criticized, if it's not up to snuff, if it feels dated, that's all after the fact. But even if it comes out and if it crashes and burns, it's going to be something that everybody talks about. Yeah, I played Detroit Become Human way back in the day. That was a long time ago. That was when I only streamed on Purple. I don't think you can look at a franchise this long standing in a game that's this anticipated and be like, yeah, it won't be relevant. I mean, we're here right now talking about it right now. My kiddos asked me what my shirt stood for. And I was like, well, it's dragon language. Fus Ro Da. It's force, balance. Oh, shoot. What's the third one? Force, balance. I forget. It's been so long since I played. And I said, it's really cool in the game. I was like, you learn to speak the language of dragons. And when you say, like, Fus Ro Da, like, if you say these words, it causes, things to happen. Like, you can push people and destroy things and stuff. And I said, it's really awesome. Like, I remember the first time I climbed up that mountain. And that old man taught me all that stuff, and then he taught me how to say, force. That's a memory because it was so impactful. It was so cool. It was so lore driven, and also it was kind of mysterious as well. You're like, what in the world's going on up here? Like, what are these guys doing? I'm gonna learn to say the language of dragons. So, and then my daughter immediately starts talking about like Aragon, the dragon books that she really likes to read. Force balance push. Thank you. Force balance push. Crimson Desert has 2 million wish lists. That game is wow. All right. I hope they nail it. I really do. He did another interview, and boy, oh boy, are they do not want to talk about console performance. They will slalom right around being direct about it. I don't think we're going to know until it's like installable and playable on consoles. Graybeards, stream in Dragonese, please. I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's against my contract. Can also learn not to trust Bethesda anymore. Well, to me, it's not about trust, it's about confidence. Right? It's not about trust, it's about confidence. It's not that like, and I think there are people who have reasons to not trust Todd because of the way he talks about games, right? He is basically the quintessential hype man, 16 times the detail. I don't know if he'll ever live that one down. But like, to me, it's less about trust. It's more about confidence. Like, I don't really do the whole, let's look at every single thing you ever said in a trailer, because when you're hyping up a game, I think it is about trust. I think it's both. To me, it's more about confidence because it's more than him. It's the whole company. Like, he can come out and wear a fancy jacket and say things and then look kind of dumb when Fallout 76 comes out. And certainly the way he positioned Starfield in similar ways, right? Like, he talked about it in ways that didn't seem to accurately represent the experience in the product and what we were going to be doing. So I think it is both. For me, I'm thinking more about confidence in the team. Trusting Todd when he comes out and talks, I think we all have a right to be like, yeah, sure, Todd, whatever you say. I think he has to wear that. I think he just does. It's like, you said it. Nobody made you say it. Nobody made you say 16 times the detail, and it just works. And, all of the language he used about exploration in Starfield, and, the planets and what have you. Nobody forced him to say those things. But to me, it's more about confidence in the machine of Bethesda, in the creation engine, in their teams, in their vision. Like, I obviously think he is a potential barrier to the game transcending into the modern landscape because he thought 30 FPS was okay in Starfield. And I'm not even talking about like when they did an interview with IGN and kind of had to like make it sound like it was going to be okay. I'm talking like you can go back and listen to the interview with Lex Friedman, and you can just listen to the way he kind of thinks about these games. I get the impression that Todd thinks about games in an almost ethereal, artistic way, to where if you're achieving some element of design or structure that you think, man, that's really great, that almost matters more. It's almost like he's looking at the scaffolding and the frame and not the painting. Does that make sense? It's like if you listen to the way that he talks, I feel like sometimes he just thinks about games in a very different way. It's like you've been on the other side, like of the keyboard and the vision casting and the structure building. And this is relevant to the thing that I tweeted this morning about like Hellblade 2 is like my most disappointing game this gen. I think they became infatuated with the technology. They thought, oh my gosh, if we motion capture every sword swing, every attack, every piece of the combat, it'll make the combat look so incredible. And it did in the trailers. Similarly, I think when you're on this side of development for all this time, I think you can get infatuated with systems and structure, and, you know, you see all of the lines connected in the background, but it's like it doesn't end up looking beautiful on the canvas. It's like you can see how everything's interconnected, or you can see the far-reaching scope of systems and all this stuff that you've built, but at the end of the day, it doesn't translate into an enjoyable game. I think that is, to me, an issue. It's like you've got to be able to think like a gamer of today. Because if you're not willing to do that, I think you're going to ignore all modern game amenities, and you're going to end up with a game that might be pretty or might be decent looking, but it's not going to feel like something from today. They were right, it looks stunning, but they forgot to make a game. Right. Todd refuses to let go of the creation engine because he relies on modders to make his games better. I think that's one area where I get very frustrated as well, because here's something that's really interesting about the creation engine, and I feel like it's Schrodinger's engine, okay? It's both awful and dated, but also really impressive. Let me explain what I mean. So, if we just take Starfield as an example, I want you to look at Starfield and how it launched, and like how the NPCs looked, and how things kind of played out. And then I want you to look a month, roughly, maybe less, after the game had been out, all of what the modders were able to do. They made the NPCs look better. They created all of these things that kind of dressed up and prettied up the game. Okay? It's like, okay, let me get this straight. Why couldn't y'all do that? The modders could do it. Why couldn't Bethesda do it? That's what I mean. It's like Schrodinger's engine. It's like it's in a box, and it's both great and bad at the same time. It's like the modders do impressive things. Yo, good morning, Brian. How are you? Guys, if you haven't done so already, as you come into the stream, hit that like button. Try to get us to 200 likes before the first hour of the stream. So that's what I've always found confusing, is because people will talk about, like, we need to move past the creation engine, but then they'll point to all of the crazy things the mods do, and I'm like, the modders do, and I'm like, huh? Well, if the modders can do it, why can't Bethesda do it? Why couldn't you launch Starfield and have the NPCs look as good as the modders made them look? Like, what was the deal there? Now, I don't think it's lack of ability. I think that's the big, where a lot of the stuff we're going to watch here in about, in about 15 minutes, we'll start reacting to the content. We'll start reacting to the videos. If you listen to these videos and these concerns that we're going to look at, I don't think it's lack of ability. I don't. I think it's philosophical, not within the triage. I think they triage that right off the table. They're like, that's fine. It's fine. The NPC stands there. That's what the NPC needs to do. They don't need to look and emote and have, eyeball movement that doesn't look creepy. Yeah, no, that's fine. The NPC just needs to stand there. I think it's a philosophical decision that certain things are not prioritized, which is absurd because modders come behind and there's like one guy or like a handful of people that take the game and do really impressive things with it. And it's like, you guys are an awfully big company. How come you couldn't do this? It's not that they couldn't do it. It's that it's not a priority. I won't be surprised if Elder Scrolls is super woke. Don't. Agree that the modders are using the same tools as the developers. The engine is the issue. How is the... But that's what I don't understand. How is the engine the issue if the modders can make the game look good? Now, I'm not talking about like the loading screens or like the dated feel and the systems. That all could be limitations of the engine for sure. A $10 super chat with Mr. Grimm. He says, people talk about modding Bethesda games even before it comes out. The game should already be good without the mods. The mods should be a cool additive to the game, not a crutch to make it better. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It needs to feel like a game from today. The guy said that in his video. He said it in his video. He was like, people of today will compare your game to games from today. You're going to have a really hard time getting somebody to buy this game and being like, oh, but it's so much better than the game that came out, 15 years ago. How long, when did Skyrim first originally come out? I don't even remember. Skyrim original release date. 2011? Did I get it right? Is that 15 years ago? 15 years ago. 15 years ago, yeah. So you're going to be really hard to tell somebody, but it's so much better than the one that came out 15 years ago. They're going to be like, I didn't play that one. And if they did, it's like a distant memory. I couldn't remember what DA meant this morning. Fusro DA. Force, balance, it's push. I couldn't remember that it was push. I mean, that's a long time ago. I was living a very different life. I was a different person. To be like, yeah, but it's so much better. I was like, nobody's going to be doing that comparison. They might have a mentality that as long as it's good enough or acceptable, they move on. That's how I look at the mentality of modern gaming. Not all studios, but a lot of them nowadays. Well, we'll get into this with the writing, because here's something I think we need to see more in your writing teams. And I'm not going to get into some big woke, anti-woke thing with you guys, because I'm basically both. People have accused me of being a wokey or being an anti-woke. I'm accused of all of it, because people can't think outside of labels. So, I genuinely mean this. You need anybody on your writing team, if they're like postmodern relativist, you've got to get them out. You got to get them out of the room. I don't think you can tell good fantasy stories. I don't think you can tell good heroic stories without hardline morality. Like, if you don't have those bright lines, I don't feel like these games work. I don't feel like the consequences of your choices, I don't feel like any morality systems that you have in place, right, wrong, good, evil, if you don't have these, I don't think these worlds and stories, they don't work. They don't work. It's like no one cares about your gray, nebulous, like amoeba-like morality. We're like, well, no, you got to have those bright lines. You can't go back and read. I mean, any of the best fantasy stories that I've ever read, you have to have that. If you have this relativistic, like postmodern view of morality, I don't think games like this function with that at their core. When you have that at the core, you're not going to have that impactful feel. You're not going to have that sense of heroism or evil or right and wrong. If you don't have that, I don't think you have a good story. Like, the absence of antithesis makes stories not almost boring and non-existent. Like, if you read The Lord of the Rings, if you read Wheel of Time, if you read Stormlight Archives, if you read these, there are bright lines. There are evil people, there are good people. There are people trying to fight against the evil, there are people trying to be corrupt and backstab and betray. That doesn't work. You have no compass, you have no map, you have no bearing if you don't have those bright lines. I don't think a good story can exist without them. It's just, who are you cheering for? Who do you care about? Every story has these three tenets: crisis, struggle, and resolution. How do you define the crisis, the struggle, and the resolution without being like, there is clearly right and wrong? There's an idea of truth. Like, if you don't have those things, then I don't know how you tell a compelling story. And I think especially in fantasy and in these realms of like dragons and darkness and wizards and magic, like when you're in these realms, none of those things have anything to ground on, tether to, or land on. If you're in like this very sort of more relativistic view of these things, it doesn't work. It's like you don't have anything to set up as like guardrails for the game story. So if you want your person's choices to matter, like a lot of the worry and concern people have for Fable is the morality system isn't going to be a morality system. It's going to be, oh, people in this town like or dislike me because of the things I've chosen to do, but it's all very gray. And then you go to a new town and you're not known as evil or good. You can kind of start over. You know, fans of Fable aren't happy about that. And I think in a similar way, if you want impactful choices and impactful decisions within Elder Scrolls 6, whoever's on your writing team, if I'm telling you that if they're from that postmodern relativistic school of thought about truth and about morality, you got to get them out of the room. They're gonna write a terrible story. It'll be so boring and so uninteresting, especially within the realm of impactful decisions. Are you siding with the good guys, the bad guys? Are there people playing both sides? Are there people doing double crosses? Are there factions? Are there villains? None of that works without a firm grip on, no, there is truth, there is right and wrong. These are very, very immovable barriers and boundaries that give your story a foundation to land on, and then you can build up from there. Then you can have true and meaningful impact on the world and the characters and your own story that you're sort of experiencing within the RPG, your role-playing. I slightly agree with Elder Scrolls 6 having woke concern elements due to Microsoft directives. Did you see Landmine Minecraft stepped on yesterday? Then we'll put it in chat and start a firestorm. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't think Microsoft's going to be giving directives to their developers within that realm. I think Microsoft's going to be more prone to give directives for cadence and delivery and timelines. They want software out there and for sale. What's the big Elder Scrolls news this morning? Okay, so here's what happened. Basically, all of a sudden, my timeline was full of people that are worried about the Elder Scrolls 6. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And somebody said, you really need to watch this video from Epic Nate. And then I watched a video by MattyPlays. And then I watched a video by Mugthief. And then I watched a video by LegacyKillaHD. And then I watched another video this morning by somebody, I can't remember the name, but I'll show you the clip. Yo, Snow, thank you so much for the raid. Bringing your people over. Appreciate you. You see the Windows 11 update broke the ROG Ally X. Yeah, I saw the headlines. I didn't really look further than that. Isn't that more realistic that each NPC has their own opinion of me based on my actions and not some invisible choice sheet they read before meeting me? Morality in people is gray. Well, what I meant was it's not like a morality system where your choices impact your character. It's more about like, oh, this town likes or doesn't like me based on the things that I have done. And then you can go to the next town and have a completely different experience. So your character doesn't have an overarching morality arc. Like when you read a book and there's a guy who's been really, really villainous and terrible, you don't get to chapter 7, he struts into some new town and all of a sudden now he's not villainous and terrible and he's nice. That would be very odd. That would be called like character arc destruction, which, you know, Ryan Johnson's very familiar with this. So like if you're going to do character arc destruction in a book, it would be very frustrating for the person reading it. They're like, well, I thought this person was evil and now they're good. That's what it's going to feel like in Fable. You have no overarching, this is the way they described it, you have no overarching morality. You aren't good or evil. It's just transactional within the confines of every town that you go to. Now, you can choose to be consistently awful or good, so every town treats you the same, but you get basically a clean slate every time you go to a new town. And Metal Matt with a 5-bomb comes in and bumps the line 87. Thank you so much. Snow says, Peekaboo from Snow and the Raiders. We don't mean to scare you, but we hope we surprise you. I always get surprised by you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Snow. If the towns are super far apart, wouldn't having new rep in a new town be realistic? It wasn't easy to travel back in medieval times, and I think Fable is set during that period. Right, but the idea is that if you're growing in prominence and you're growing in power and renown and people know you, then they would know you in the town. That's the whole point. You're becoming a fable. You're becoming a legend. You're becoming this thing that is known, not a ruler, a king, a tyrant, or whatever, a dictator. If you're going to be rising to power, prominence, and notoriety, it would make sense then for that town to be like, yeah, we know all about you. We know what you're up to. Do you see? When you rip that from the game, it's no longer a morality system. It's like you're playing like cause and effect simulator in every town. You know what I mean? Yes, he caught a stray. He's an expert at character arc destruction. Like, he could write a book on how to do it. The Fable system sounds half-baked. Why would I care? Yeah, the point that I'm making is that if you're going to come into a game and you want to have impactful choices and systems, you have to have the undercurrents to every good story is absolutes. Because we all assume them anyway. So when you're reading a story and it's assuming that there's right and wrong, when it assumes that, you immediately are tethered to that reality because there's an undercurrent. Like, you don't have to have it explained to you when you read The Wheel of Time or Stormlight Archives, or when you read The Lord of the Rings. The author doesn't have to establish, just so you all know, this world, there's right and wrong. There's truth. There's things that are not true. There's falsehood. There's deception. They don't have to do that. The book assumes it. And so you just get in like all these dark riders, the ring, the Eye of Sauron. All these things are assuming things about reality. And if you want to have a really good RPG and you really want to have your choices feel like they matter, the game needs to assume those things. If it doesn't assume those things and you get into this like postmodern relativism, this gray blah, you can't have a good story there because it's like, well, then wait a minute. Is anybody really wrong or right? Or are we just we're just gonna have this like moral ambiguous nothing? Like you if you don't have those things, I'm telling you, you can't have a good fantasy story. You can't. Good versus evil is perfectly fine for a video game. We're not reading a book or watching a movie, but we are, in a sense, reading a book or watching a movie. We're experiencing a story in a world. That's literally what a video game is. It's living art. Don't even call it good versus evil. Just have different ideologies to choose from. Okay, but beneath that is the idea that there is right and wrong. There are things that are true and there are things that are false. If you join a guild that's all about stealing and staying in the shadows and hiding, that's assuming something about reality. It's assuming something about the consequences if you get caught. You could even have ideologies within the game that reject that notion. They reject the notion that there should be law or justice or jail or any of those things. That ideology only works in the game if it's assuming bright lines about truth, bright lines about morality. That ideology makes no sense if you're placing it in something that already is ambiguous, already is sort of a my truth relativistic slop. Like, I'm serious. This is not a woke, anti-woke thing. This is quite literally how you write good stories. You think of your favorite story, you think of your favorite book series, you think of your favorite movies, and I'm telling you, dollars to donuts, every time a story impacts you, every time a story sticks with you, those elements are there. The moment when the dawn breaks, the moment when the good thing happens, the moment when the evil guy gets his comeuppance, the moment when the hero finally shows up, the moment when the guy does what he needs to do, or the girl stands up to the bully, all those moments matter because it's assuming things about reality that we all know to be true instinctively, and that's why it speaks to you and that's why it impacts you. And if you're going to make a good RPG and you're going to make good stories, those things have to be in place. Whether you're playing Red Dead Redemption or Skyrim or even GTA 6, if those things aren't in place, then it doesn't matter. What does it matter if you're breaking the law or getting involved in debauchery in GTA 6 if the game doesn't assume things about reality that we already know to be true? I'm telling you, if you can't have those folks in the room, you got to have people with more. I think you have to have people in the room with those sorts of views about truth and about morality. If you don't have those things in the room, I don't think you can write a good fantasy story. I don't think you can have a good morality system within your game. You want to be a hero? You want to be a villain? The game has to assume those are possible. The game has to assume those are measurement scales that are there and undeniable. If those scales aren't there and assumed, then what is evil? What is being a hero? It's not defined then. It's not tethered to anything. It's just this nothing. It's just, well, you're just going to become strong and go do quests. Okay. Some of the most impactful stories, some of the most memorable stories have those poignant moments. The ones that we've played, the games we've played that have stuck with us, the stories that have stuck with us, I'm serious. Those are the elements of the stories that are there. Not even remotely true. Some of us root for the bad guy or just want to watch it all burn in a story. I didn't presume anything about what you cheer for. How can you know who the bad guy is if you don't have bright lines of good and evil? You cheering for the bad guy has no bearing on what I'm saying. You knowing who the bad guy is isn't possible if you don't have bright lines of truth and morality assumed by the story. If you're going to cheer for the Joker, you can only do that because you understand him within the realm of antithesis. You can only understand him within the confines of the world that they put him in, which is there is right and wrong. He doesn't make any sense without that. There's no equation to figure him out if you don't assume those things. Once you assume those things, yeah, by all means, cheer for the Joker. That's your prerogative as a person. There's been a major trend in games not letting you just be a straight up villain. Look at Rings of Power and what they did to the orcs and the other villains. Yeah, that's a perfectly good example of when you try to bring this postmodern idea to a world where there were bright lines of good and evil. And all of a sudden you muddy that and blur that. And you're like, well, yeah, we don't really understand them. They've got children and they're trying to survive. And it's like, agree that there needs to be a group that is good and one that is bad, but those groups live in a pocket. They aren't like those around them and have different opinions on each subject is presented. Well, I would imagine, Gail, if you have a game with morality systems and factions, what you're going to have is you're going to have people all along the spectrum. You're going to have people that are brazenly wicked and evil, and you're going to have people that are like unfailingly good, and then everybody in between. You'll have a faction that might compromise and might be okay with a little stealing here and there. You might have a faction that thinks the ends justify the means. Yeah, we did lie to them and double-cross them in that deal, but we're doing this for the greater good, or we're doing this for our people. Like, you certainly can have all those people all across the spectrum. Everything I just said is nonsensical if you don't have bright lines. Nothing I said makes any sense if you don't believe that if the world itself doesn't assume that there's right and wrong and that there's truth. There can be shades in between, but they're all still measurable there are opposite ends of the spectrum. I had Omar saying the same thing I'm saying. It doesn't make sense. It's an equation without a graph. It's just a bunch of dots with no graph. It's like where, if you don't have those things of like the bright lines of good and evil, if you don't have those, then there's no way to put those dots on a graph because you have no graph. You have no map. You have no compass. It's just a bunch of gray. And I think that's why you need writers in the room that think those things and believe those things, because if they don't, they're going to bristle against that and they're going to think that that's wrong. You know, listen, we've all interacted with the My Truth people. I'm here to tell you, they're never going to be good writers. They're never going to tell compelling stories, because compelling stories have to assume those things about reality. You cannot create crisis, struggle, and resolution without assumed, like, bright black and white lines of right, wrong, and truth. If those things are not assumed, I don't think you can write a good story, because then you have no bearing of who is what. Who's good, who's wrong, who's bad, who's supposed to how do I know when things are resolved? What's the crisis? What's wrong here? What needs fixed? How do you measure that? How do you? You can't. And that's why, and I think this is especially true in fantasy stories, because in fantasy stories, you usually have a protagonist that must overcome insurmountable odds. And in overcoming those insurmountable odds, they have to be brave, they have to deal with fear, they have to be dealing with doubt of themselves, and they're facing something that is just horrifying or evil or stronger than them. All those elements of a story, they only work if you assume those things about reality. I don't think they work if you don't. It's like, well, the moment that Sam gives Frodo the speech about, by all rights, we shouldn't even be here, but folks in those old stories kept going, Mr. Frodo. Like, that speech that he gives, that only matters because of what they're facing. It's like, what does it matter? What if there's no right and wrong? I mean, then just let him take over. He's stronger. He's got more people. His army's bigger. You know, he can see everything. What's the deal? Like, why? You see what I mean? It only works. You only get goosebumps in that moment. You only cheer at that moment because you're like, yeah, we want the good guys to win. We want evil to be squelched. Storytelling isn't about reality or objective truth. Yes, it is. It's always going to be a reflection and a mirror of the actual truth. It's always a dim reflection of things we already know and believe. Whether it's a love story or a comedy or, you know, a great heroic tale, it 100% is a reflection of reality. It always will be. It's a reflection of what the author thinks about reality. And if it doesn't assume things about reality that we all instinctively know to be true, then it's not going to be a very good story. You can't really sympathize with a story about somebody did something to somebody else, but we have no bearing of right and wrong or objective truth. So it's like, well, I mean, then who's to say if he was right or he was wrong? It's like, well, then who do I cheer for? Like, if you've suffered injustice or you've had things taken from you or you've been hurt by others, and then you watch a story about that, it has meaning and impact because you know that injustice is a real thing. You know that there are people that try to do you harm and try to hurt you. Everybody's been through that, you know. Stories of grief. Like, one of the reasons Expedition 33's story struck a chord with so many people is because we've all experienced grief. We've all had friendships break down, loss of a job, loss of a loved one. Every single person's been touched by grief. So it's a universal experience of the human condition to be like, this is a terrible thing. Don't start asking why it's a terrible thing. That goes a little bit deeper and a little bit more philosophical. Why does it seem broken? Why does it seem like something needs to be turned back? But the point is that is a reflection of reality. It is. That's the story you tell yourself. Well, no. I mean, everybody is impacted by the story differently, but that doesn't change that the story itself is a reflection of reality. Does that make sense? Like, the story in Expedition 33 is a reflection of reality. It shows you a glimpse into what people do, how people grieve, how people go through trauma. That is a thing that we know to be true. We've known people that have gone through it. We've gone through it ourselves. I've seen up close and personal the wreckage that happens when someone loses a loved one, right? Like we've been there. And that story, the reason it impacts us all differently is we've all lived different lives. But it still has a thread within it that is just a representation of something that we know to be true. Without that, then what is it? If there's not a thread of permanence, if there's not something beneath that surface, there's not a river underneath of saying, hey, there's actual objective truth out there. There's a reality that isn't, this amoeba that we can shape into whatever we want, then that makes the story something that we can all enjoy together and commiserate about, because we've all lived a life that is touched by these things, whether it's moments where you need to be brave and heroic and press on, or moments where you're grieving, or moments where you're cheering for the good guy to finally win. I'm serious. In a game like Elder Scrolls, if you want that story to feel impactful, if you want your decision to be impactful, I'm telling you, the picture that gets missed in a lot of these discussions is, at a ground level, you need a belief in morality and objective truth. If you do not believe in those things, if you don't write from that perspective, it will not work as a story. It will not work as a morality system. It won't feel impactful. It won't feel meaningful. It won't. If you do any form of like literary criticism and you study any book, go to any book, go to any story where you have the crisis, the struggle, the resolution, you have the protagonist, you have the antagonist, you have all of the pieces and parts that make up a good story, you're never, ever going to find a critically acclaimed story that doesn't have those assumptions baked deep into the crust. It's just there. It's assumed. Like the ground beneath your feet when you're walking. It's just there. It's like, well, yeah, of course. There's good, there's evil. There's right, there's wrong. There's truth and falsehood. These are universal measurements. Like that you can't escape it. You try and write a story without it. Try and write a story without it. It's almost impossible. Just the idea of having a protagonist and an antagonist is the idea of antithesis. It's the idea of black and white. It doesn't work without that. It doesn't. And we're going to look at some of these videos here because we've got people that are concerned about the writing, the team, the changes, everything else. And I think this is very pertinent to the discussion. I want to start with Epic Nate's video. This is the video that set the whole thing off, okay? This is the video that set the whole thing off. So we will have links in the description, and we will I'll obviously pause it and remark. We always want to support the original content. I'm fairly certain none of the videos I'm going to react to are new. They're all days or weeks old. In this case, this is a 13-day-old video. It has 1 million views, okay? I do not like putting people's content in my content unless it has been on the platform for long enough to be treated well by the platform. I never want to serve as a replacement to a video that's kind of like on its way up, okay? So, if you like this kind of content where like I pick a larger topic and I go grab a bunch of stuff for us to kind of react to and talk about and dialogue, be sure to hit the like button. That supports me. That gets us to the next milestone of 200 likes. Double check your primes. Double check your renewals. Those help us hit the weekly goal. And when we hit that weekly goal, we do a stream on Saturday night with my wife. She'll react to gaming news from the week. And we should have something for GTA 6 tomorrow. So, all right. This video is called, we have a pretty dark Elder Scrolls 6 update. Let's watch it.
Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And
Good.
We just got a pretty serious, in my opinion, kinda dark and gloomy update regarding the Elder Scrolls 6 that I'd like to talk about for a bit. Now, while I think I can fairly be described as a Bethesda YouTuber, I don't really do news or current events. There are people who are much better at that kind of thing than me, and I got some other projects currently in the pipeline right now that I'm focused on. This is something of a one-off, just because I think it's really important, and I think my familiarity with Elder Scrolls lore and the exact people behind it can give this story a bit more context that may not be communicated elsewhere. Okay, so what am I talking about? Well, 2 days ago, at the time of working on this video, Samuel Horty, a freelance journalist working on behalf of PC Gamer, published a brief feature interview with Kurt Coleman, a former writer, programmer, and designer at Bethesda Game Studios, who had...
I want to stop it and say this. I'm still waiting for Pete Hines to do some interviews where he kind of starts to delve into some of the subjects that we're going to hear about from this interview. Like, I'm still like, okay, are we ever going to get to kind of hear... Are we ever going to get to hear, like, what Pete's got to say? Because I feel like he's got some things to say. I feel like he's kind of made that clear.
Been with the company for almost as long as Todd, and served as one of Skyrim's co-lead designers before ultimately resigning from the company just a week or so after Starfield's release in late 2023. You know, there are all these interviews and podcasts with former Bethesda employees you can find online these days, but Coleman is the highest up and possibly most impactful person at the company to have done something like this, in my opinion. He joined back in 1996, almost 30 years ago, where he was a junior designer on The Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall. After Daggerfall, he and Michael Kirkbride, a fellow writer and designer, pitched the idea for what would become The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, and together the two were the game's co-lead designers and writers, alongside Todd Howard. There were some particularly big contributions made to the lore at this time by Kirkbride and Coleman that we can get into later. During Redguard's development, he also did much of the early narrative design work for Morrowind, but left the company in 1998 before the game released. Kurt returned...
I think it's really important to get this backstory because a lot of the times, I don't think we need to do this every time somebody leaves a company, because I do think sometimes, like, you'll ship a product and then it's time to go, it's time to retire, it's time to do something new. So we don't always need to, like, try to read the tea leaves of, like, somebody who left a company. But when you have somebody who's kind of there at the most formative moments and also has a body of work that is, you know, impressive or memorable, I think that's helpful to sort of say, okay, this is tied to a bigger picture of concern here. This is tied to a bigger picture of worry. So I think it's helpful to see the, you know, the history here. I think a lot of the times, though, we can overstate what that means, because we've seen a lot of companies have people leave. Sometimes it literally means nothing at all. With Bethesda, I think there's been more worrying signs with respect to people leaving, the culture at the company. We're going to get into that. There's so many videos I have to show you today. There's so many comments. Now, the other videos, we are not going to watch them in their entirety. I've got little snippets. I wanted to watch the entire Epic Nate video because this is what set everything off. Everybody's making their videos now worried about The Elder Scrolls 6.
Turned to Bethesda in 2003 as a writer and programmer for Oblivion, where he worked on the main questline and later was the lead for some of its DLC. Finally, in his most famous position, Coleman was co-lead designer for Skyrim alongside Bruce Nesmith. He also did a great deal of quest writing and programming for the title. In some sense, with Todd as director, you could say he was the number 3 guy on this project, certainly one of the figures most responsible for the game's development. Kurt has, of course, also worked a great deal on the Fallout franchise as a writer and quest designer for Fallouts 3 and 4, though it's clear Elder Scrolls has really been his favorite series of projects. He was a systems designer on 76 following the release of 4, and at long last, he concluded his tenure at Bethesda after being the lead systems designer for Starfield.
I really just wanted to say this, like, just those clips of Fallout, they have nailed... They're nailing that show, boys. Like, they really are. Like, just seeing that gun and, like, a couple seconds, I was like, oh, man. If you're not watching that show, I know this is a total sidebar. Y'all are missing out, okay? You are severely missing out if you ain't watching that show.
I say all of this just to give you guys a sense of this person's position and significance within the company. We're not talking about a lighting artist or a junior programmer. Not to say those people don't do important work, but this is someone who was intimately involved in Elder Scrolls lore, making some of the biggest and, I think, some of the best decisions in the universe's cosmology and story. At the time of his departure, a lot of sources described him as the Elder Scrolls lore master. Anyway, I've gotten a little off track. So, PC Gamer publishes this short, what I'll call a feature interview with him on January 15th.
Now, he used the word cosmology there, which is sort of about, like, origins of things, okay? So, like, if you've ever heard of, like, the cosmological argument, that's what that's kind of referring to. So, like, if you have somebody like that can think in sort of a cosmological sense about creating a world and lore, I think that is a significant thing. If you've ever read The Wheel of Time, there's a moment where Robert Jordan has one of the main characters experience an entire history of a people by going backwards through memories. It is phenomenal storytelling, world building. It's this sort of cosmological trajectory of this is the origin of this group that you're now interacting with. There are ancient causes at work. That's so cool when you have that within a game. There's something you can do within storytelling to create this sense of grandiosity, this sense of history. You can make a world feel ancient, not just through your art direction, but through little nuggets of history and these elements that sort of whisper through time of like, we're like, oh my gosh, this building or these people have been around for such a long time. I think that's incredibly important to this type of storytelling. So if you've got a guy like this that can do that, that needs to be stated. That is an enormous asset to your world building. World building is not just about the characters and the mountains and the art direction. It's about everything that the game assumes and presumes happened before you show up. That is immensely important, I think, for immersion and meaningful storytelling. So if you guys haven't hit the like button yet, thanks so much for tuning in while we're listening to this video. We got a lot of videos to check out today on this subject of, is Elder Scrolls 6 doomed? Try to get us to 200 likes. If you guys haven't done that yet, hit that little thumbs up.
It's kind of weird. It's not a full interview. It's more like a series of quotations surrounded by context. My feeling is that the magazine did a long, formal interview with him, and now they're breaking it up into pieces to trickle out. Whatever the case, Coleman spoke pretty candidly, if briefly here, about his vision for what the Elder Scrolls 6 ought to have been like, and how some decisions around the game's production appear to have resulted in his resignation. The article opens with the alumni describing his frustration with the company's changing culture as it's grown since Skyrim. Quote, "In the early days, it was a close group of developers, including Todd Howard, in a basement office making decisions and eating in the canteen together," he says. But new offices opened, and other studios were folded in by owners at Max Media, including Battlecry Studios and Escalation Studios, both in 2018. ZeniMax was itself bought by Microsoft in 2021.
Now, it can be really easy to hear things like this, and you can do one of two things. You can say, oh, the good old days are long gone, or you can be dismissive and be like, well, this is just some old fuddy-duddy who's like thinking back fondly on the good old days. What he's describing here is, I think, one of the reasons why some of these companies lose their way and their glory days are obvious compared to when things start to go awry. This is not the only developer that we've heard this from. Like, the early days were scrappy, and there's like this intimacy where they're always together and they're always talking and they're arguing and they're figuring things out, right? They're going from one meeting to going and eating lunch, and the meeting's probably still happening, right? What this does is it creates cohesion and cartilage and vision transfer. You have this thing that's coming to life. And when you get away from that, I think that's when you start to have games that feel, and we've experienced this, we've all experienced this, where you feel like a game is disjointed. You feel like there's a lack of harmony. You feel like there's a lack of synergy. I think that can be seen within the structures at the company. Now, I'm not saying you got to have this romantic view of how development happens, but I do think this is like suffering from success. You get big, you get lots of money, you get all this studio space, you get all these employees, and you're going to lose some of that intimacy. You're going to lose some of that cohesion, and things become more production line. Things they become more bureaucratic, and that can hurt the product.
By the time Starfield shipped in 2023, quote, "It's 4 remote studios all working together on a game," Coleman says. When you get to that side...
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I didn't pre-watch this. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you get to that scope, it's like 4 remote studios working together. How are you... Like, that's really... I'm not saying it's impossible. It's really, really difficult to have vision transfer and have, like, one giant cohesive vision for the game that's operating in synergy. The people are they're all separated by time, by geography, time zones especially. I mean, there's a lot here. There's a lot here that I think can start to show you where sometimes it's not necessarily ineptitude. It's just like you've become so big, your systems start to fold in on themselves and become inefficient. I do think we're going to start to see the rise of the medium-sized studio. I think these giant gargantuan studios, I think they're going to become more and more inefficient. They're just too big for their own good. It becomes very, very challenging to make a game in a good and compelling and efficient way. You end up with games that feel like the way Starfield felt. It felt like it was very, very separated and segmented. It's like, well, somebody clearly worked on this, and then somebody clearly worked on this, and the bridge between those two things is a bunch of loading screens. Like, I genuinely think you can see the work culture bleed into the game's design.
Guys, you can't have people just popping into Todd Howard's office to chat about a design point. He's not having lunch with everybody. It's very different when it's 400 people. 4 studios, big business, and now Microsoft is involved. He goes on to largely affirm what many former Bethesda devs who left after Starfield have since stated. The studio's massive size and new layers of bureaucracy introduced by the acquisition have led to frequent breakdowns in communication with cascading results for development. He goes on to say that Todd Howard's increasingly large workload has been a particularly serious loss for the quality of the company's work. Quote, Todd's a very good project lead, and fundamentally, I think he's a designer at heart. And he's good at it, obviously. If you look...
Hang on a second. I want to comment on the Todd thing here a second. Kevin George, you're saying, watch the YouTube videos. Women working at these studios take too many breaks and are constantly eating. I never see them doing much work. That's bloat. I can't take what you're saying seriously at all. You cannot be serious right now. Are you literally watching these little mini docu-series, dev directs and trailers and like studio tours? And are you getting out like a stopwatch and being like, yep, there's another one. There's another female getting up and taking a break? What the heck? That you can't be being serious right now. That's the most absurd thing I think I've ever read on this topic. Like, it seems like one of those people that want to take a screenshot of like Women's Appreciation Day at the office, and then they act like, yeah, this studio is just all women now. The game's going to be bad. I'm just commenting on the videos. What the frick? That's what I mean. I've never noticed that. I've never watched one of these videos and been like, man, all the women folk are eating and taking breaks. Like, huh? Like, what the? I don't think I've ever noticed that. I don't think I've ever noticed that, bro. I didn't mean to take it specifically about women. That's just what I watched. For not wanting to make it specifically about women, you singled them out for some reason. I can't wait for the breakout interview. They're like, yeah, man, I really liked working there until they brought all these whammons in here, man. They were taking breaks all the dadgum time, eating food and going to the restroom. They go to the restroom in packs, you know that, right? No, we can't get any work done. Like, okay, well, anyways. He said, so you can start to see the breakdown here of you got somebody like Todd, you know, you become that more hands-off. I think people started to talk about how like he would just do like these drive-bys in meetings and like crap on everybody's ideas. And I wonder if that story that we've heard and that theme that we've heard is part of what we're seeing here. We're kind of getting a glimpse of, you know, that disconnected feel at the company where you lose that, as we talked about a little bit ago, that intimacy.
Look back at the games. But over time, as he got busier and every part of this larger and larger organization wanted him to do stuff for their project, he would get pulled away, unquote. Howard made good decisions, Coleman says. So when he wasn't around, games suffered. Sometimes choices made in Howard's absence needed undoing later.
That's interesting because that goes against what I have said. I feel like Howard's part of the problem, and I base that off of the Lex Friedman interview and kind of how I think he views games. I don't know if he views them in 2026. I feel like he views games as if it's still like 2010. Like certain standards and ideas and philosophies that he haven't really come out of that time frame. It's like he's still stuck back there to a certain degree. I think Howard's a visionary. I think he's good at what he does, but I also think you can have like philosophical like bedrock in your view of things that is old, and that can be good, but in this case I think it can be kind of bad. What's interesting though is this guy's saying Oh no, Howard not being involved enough and not making enough decisions has actually been very bad. Things were having to be reversed that people did, without him in the room. I would say that's less of a problem with Howard not being involved. That's more of a problem of just not having very good leadership. If leadership's making decisions, like, listen, if you can't have team leads and people in charge that are making executive decisions because they understand the vision and where things are supposed to go and things have to be removed, this company needs to be able to operate without Todd Howard stamping a yes on everything. That seems absolutely inefficient. There's like no way that to me speaks much larger of a problem than like, oh, Todd Howard's too disconnected. What do you mean? Why don't you have good leaders? Why don't you have good vision transfer so they're able to act on decisions and choices because they have like a triage of how they make decisions about different things within the department that they're in? Like, if you don't have that, then what are these people doing? If they're making those decisions, they have to be reversed by Todd. The company cannot. The company's called Bethesda. It's not called Todd Howard. Like the game cannot live and breathe and live and die on his yes or no. I think that's absurd.
Another point our interviewee brings up is that throughout much of his career, even when acting as a co-lead designer, Coleman was constantly able to get his hands dirty in a lot of the development work. He would write and script quests, move things around in the creation kit, but as the company grew and grew, there just wasn't the time for that. Lead designers were doing so much managerial work that they lost touch with what was actually going on the development end. Quote, "I didn't want to work that way because I like making games and being hands-on," he says. "It had gotten to a scale beyond where I was really enjoying working in that environment."
That's like super common when you go from being a grunt to a manager. It becomes a whole lot less about the work and it becomes about managing. And that's not work for some people. Like, if you're not wired that way, if you're not wired like a manager, like sort of like, I'll give you an example. My wife and I are vastly different. I'm very visionary and big idea, and I can throw out people are like, that's such a great idea. And I can't do anything beyond that. If I have to get into the specifics, the logistics, the scheduling, all of that, I'm not the details guy. My wife's the details person. So like, I can come up with a good idea, and then she comes up with the structure and the details. Right, and then we can execute on a plan or something that we're going to do or whatever. And so I think sometimes if you're not wired as a manager, you going from being a grunt to a manager can be absolutely untethering. You're like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything anymore. I'm managing people? Like, that's kind of boring. That's kind of, it's a very sanitized experience because now it's not the dirt and the grime of the work. It's, I've got to make sure that Bill is completing his tasks on time. I got to make sure that so-and-so has enough action items for the week, and I got to have a meeting with this person about how they're behind on this. That is not invigorating work if that's not how you're wired. My wife was really good. She did inventory for an AT&T store, so she was monitoring the inventory and the shipping and making sure things were logged in and checked out and all of that. I would have died 1,000 deaths working that job, and she loved it because she's detail-oriented. She's very organized, right? Just why she's such a good teacher with our kiddos. Like, I'm not wired that way. I was a salesman. I was out on the floor. I was talking with people. I was making the sale and getting to know the customers. So like, and my wife would have hated that because she doesn't like working with the public. She doesn't like interacting with people like that. Like, she's just very much my opposite. And so I definitely think within a business structure like this, sometimes that's probably a fatal mistake, is you take somebody and they're pushed into a position based off of tenure and not based off of like gifting. It's not about qualifications. It's not like he wasn't qualified. It's not his gifting. It's not his wiring, right? You're basically taking a bull out of the stocks and no longer in the dirt, and you're making the bull do something else, and it's like it just doesn't work. You've got to keep them kind of in that position, or they're going to feel like they're not doing anything with their time.
Now, here's where things really started to catch my eye. Coleman states that following the release of Skyrim, Todd Howard had promised him that he would be the lead designer for the Elder Scrolls 6. A huge position. It would essentially make him the game's number 2 guy, second only to Todd himself, who's increasingly busy with other stuff and would likely be somewhat deferential. Not only that, but Coleman suggests that work on the Elder Scrolls 6 was supposed to begin in earnest, at least as far as he originally believed, immediately following Fallout 4's release.
So this is the part where I've heard this multiple times. You guys have probably seen this headline. This started to make the rounds about, like, this guy was supposed to be second in command for Elder Scrolls. Todd made this promise. And it can be easy to shrug that off. It's like, yeah, leaders do that all the time. Like, oh yeah, man, oh yeah, I'm gonna make you the second in command, and then you get passed over, right? We've seen this sort of thing time and time again. It's not uncommon, right? Because, you know, things change, right? I think what's coming out of this, though, to me, this is the beginning of something seismic at the company where they change what they're doing next. And that's kind of led to the road where we are now. Like, all roads lead here. Everything leads to now, where you've got 76, you've got Starfield. All of these things came from this moment. So it's I understand it could be easy to dismiss the promise. You could be like, this is just some disgruntled guy who got passed over for a promotion or whatever. I think there's a bigger picture here, and the promise to him is a very, very small piece of it. I think it's a piece of it, but it's not the crux of the matter.
But for whatever reason, the company decided to pivot, first to development on Fallout 76, and then later Starfield. Coleman had waited around for this promised role for all this time, tolerating detour after detour, and by the time the company was finally ready to start work on the next Elder Scrolls, he claims that Todd did not keep his promise, and he was asked to accept a different position. Quote, Coleman states that after Skyrim, Howard verbally promised him the lead design role on the Elder Scrolls 6, which was supposed to be the next project after Fallout 4. Now we're quoting him verbatim. Of course, after Fallout 4, we didn't go to TES 6. We made Fallout 76. And then, even then, we didn't make TES 6. We made Starfield, which had become this extremely long project compared to the other ones. So, from my point of view, I've been waiting like 11 years to be the lead on TES 6, he says.
Okay. And it's easy to read that and feel like he's just coming from a disgruntled position, but the nuggets that are there are so valuable. And what I see here is something that we keep seeing time and time again. There's a pattern emerging in the market, and it all starts with Gearbox. If you go back and you look at what Gearbox did, they didn't want to be known as the Borderlands studio. Actually, you could go even further back than that. Bungie didn't want to continue being the Halo studio, so they decided to break and they made Destiny. Borderlands 3 is something that they didn't want to make. Gearbox didn't want to make it. They break and they make Battleborn. And I think that completely sidetracked their franchise. I think it's why Borderlands 3 landed so flat and it wasn't very good because it took way too long to come out. Borderlands 4, I think, did commercially well. I think it's a perfectly serviceable, very good Borderlands, but it had all sorts of optimization problems, you know, and people were very critical of it. I think by and large, it's a good looter. It's a decent story. But again, it feels very late. If Borderlands 3 would have come out when Battleborn came out, and Borderlands 4 would have come out when Borderlands 3 came out, I think their reception would be far different. And I think there's a pattern emerging here. I'm bringing it all back. Trust me, I'm bringing it all back here. I think the pattern emerging is people decide that they want to be known for something that isn't the thing that people keep bringing up. You might remember there was a time where every single time they sat down to do an interview, they would get asked about the Elder Scrolls 6. If they sat down to do an interview about Doom, they'd get asked about the Elder Scrolls 6, to the point that they just finally said, yes, okay, here's a stupid trailer that communicates nothing. We're making it. Now stop asking, right? I fault the public and the press for that. I will never, ever fault Bethesda for that trailer. It was obnoxious, okay? So what do you think happens to a man and a company and leadership internally where that's all anybody ever asks you about? I think, similarly to what happened with Bungie and similarly to what happened with Gearbox, I think people say, we need to do something else. I think there's a bit of ego at play. It's like, I want to be known for something else. We've got this vision for Starfield. Let's make that the next thing that we do. They want Elder Scrolls 6. We're going to blow their socks off with Starfield instead. That's my theory, at least, as to why we keep seeing this happening with these companies. It's like, instead of doing the thing that everybody wanted you to do, you want to buck up against that. I mean, look, we saw it with Titanfall 3 and Apex Legends. I think these companies and these leaders, maybe they start to feel stuck. Maybe they start to feel like we're just doing this because it's what people expect us to do. It's not what we really want to do. We're going to constantly be judged against the backdrop of like exaggerated memories of Skyrim and how great it is, and we're never going to be able to be better than that because it's a memory. It's not reality, right? I talked about this a little bit this morning about like, I watched this Josh Strife Hayes video about Ashes of Creation, and he made this wonderful observation about why MMORPGs keep getting kickstarted and why the people that kickstart them like ravenously defend them. And he made such a wonderful observation that made perfect sense of my coverage of Crimson Desert. He said, at that moment, it's just a dream. And in the dream, it can be perfect. It has no flaws. It's nothing but untapped potential. The game could be absolutely amazing because it's literally at that moment in time just a dream. I think that's one of the reasons why when I covered Crimson Desert, I've gotten so much pushback from people who act like the game is already out and it's magnificent and I'm insulting a masterpiece they've already experienced. Why? Because currently it's a dream. They haven't touched it yet, so it has no flaws. It's perfect right now. And I genuinely think in this situation, that happens so often. There's this idea, there's this dream that people have of what Elder Scrolls 6 could be and should be and ought to be, and the weight of that is crushing on a studio. It's crushing on Todd Howard. It's like, we're not going to do that. We'll be able to get around that. We'll do Starfield instead. I genuinely think that that's a pattern we're starting to see with companies, is they are known for something that they did, and they're like, but we don't want to do that anymore. We've seen that pattern with Bungie when they basically said they didn't want to do Destiny 3. They're like, yeah, we didn't want to do Destiny 3. So they start doing all these other side projects. Why? I think people either get tired, they get fatigued, and they also want to be known for something else. Broken Earth says, I disagree entirely. I think it was a colossal mistake to drop a teaser for the Elder Scrolls 6 if they weren't working on it. It's that's not on the public, that's on the company. No, I think the way that every interview they did and the way people handled it, it was like they were like, people won't shut up about this. The only way we can get them to shut up about it is to be like, yeah, here you go, fine, yeah, we're working on it. I don't know. I think it's a two-way street there.
I was obviously one of the old-timers there and had a lot of experience. Bruce and I had been co-leads on Skyrim. I think most people would call it a successful project, so I thought that it wasn't unreasonable for me to think that I could be a successful lead on TES 6. It wasn't just my expectation, I had been told that was going to happen. And they made the decision, no, you're not going to be the lead. The article continues,
Yo, thank you, Edward, for 40 months over there on Twitch. We're pretty far behind pace for the week, y'all, so check your renewals, check your primes, do all the things. Every 25, I've got to gift one to you guys, so the next milestone is 100. I'll owe whoever hits it a gifted member, whether it's Purple or YouTube.
Remembers that being a tough conversation, and that Bethesda's leadership hoped he'd be happy with a different position. Todd said, well, we want you to have an important role on the project, but what I wanted and what he wanted were different at that point. Unquote. Kurt Coleman, someone who I think can fairly be called one of the founding fathers of the Elder Scrolls franchise, perhaps the person most involved in the universe's lore and cosmology, at least by this point, is essentially describing an enormous rug pull and something of a betrayal. He doesn't explicitly say it, but this seems to be why he resigned from the company after Starfield.
And this is something I've always been concerned about, is when you lose somebody like him. I said something similar to when Pete Hines left. We saw similar things happen at Bungie when people left that company. There are people that go with them or really want to go with them. So what you have in their wake are people that are disgruntled. More than likely, a guy that had that level of time and that level of work and that level of longevity at the company, him leaving. And you got to know people in the office talk. They knew what he was promised. They knew what was potentially coming. And when you don't go that route, you're in his wake are a lot of probably, I would think, disgruntled employees are like, man, that was really cold what y'all did to him. That's not good. That's not good for the culture at the company. Same thing probably happened when Pete Hines left. I'm probably wrong, Lono, says Jason. That's why I thought large studios deal with the AAA games and the smaller studios under them make a possible new game or start new ideas. I think you're going to have more and more companies starting to say we should be working on, maybe 2 projects at once, break the company in half bandwidth-wise, and do like AAA quality games that are AA in size, scope, and budget. You're taking less risk, and you can get the product to the market faster and more efficiently. So I imagine they were Pete loyalists. I imagine they were people that were loyal to Kurt. I mean, that's going to be a significant problem and a significant blow to your work culture when these guys leave.
And it's hard to blame him. Now, this isn't the end of the interview. Again, Coleman does go on to talk about his ideas for Elder Scrolls 6 lore that, I suppose now, are unlikely to be implemented. But before we get to that, there's some more implicit information these quotes convey that I want to hone in on. Remember how back in 2018, when Bethesda announced Fallout 76, they also had that really short video essentially promising that they were working on the Elder Scrolls 6 and it was coming. Well, Coleman's interview pretty conclusively suggests that the game didn't even have a lead designer or likely any major staff members picked out, let alone working on it, until around the time he resigns in 2023.
And I'm telling you, it's because that trailer was not, hey, we're working on it. It was a commitment that, yes, we are going to make the Elder Scrolls 6. That's all it was. That's all it was. I literally remember covering an event where the guy sat down to talk about Doom, and they asked him immediately about Elder Scrolls 6. It was obnoxious. It was tiring. It was so irritating, and I think they just were like, you know what, fine. Here's a trailer. I don't think they made that trailer out of desire, want, or excitement. It was literally a shut the heck up trailer. They wanted people to quit asking about it, which you can say it was a terrible decision. I think your judgment is fair. I see 2 sides to the street, and I wish people would have just left them alone and been like, well, what are you working on now? What's coming out now? Instead of making it like the centerpiece of every interview.
Maybe a bit earlier. My guess is that Bethesda's leadership informed Kurt they would not be keeping their word sometime during, probably late in the development of Starfield, and he decided just to finish his work on that game and depart as soon as it finished, which adds up. Coleman formally leaves the studio just a week after Starfield's release. He had certainly made up his mind before then. What this likely means for TES 6's development is that the company really didn't begin meaningful work on the title until late 2023, early 2024. Back in August of 23, IGN reported Pete Hines, then Bethesda's senior vice president of marketing, went on the record and claimed that the game had just entered early development. And boy, must he have been telling the truth if the company was barely setting up who the game's leads would be.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that was a very massaged truth, like it was even really in production. Yo, what's good, Mag? A $10 super chat says, I haven't received a notification from this channel since last week. Make sure your notification bell is hit and you're set, not set to private. YouTube starting the year acting the fool. Yeah, Mag, I don't know why that happens, man. Thank you for the 10 spot, brother. We got to get you on the show. One of the things we're wanting to do this year is have more folks on, as well as get me on other shows as well. So let's talk. I'd love to do some yapping. I'm a professional yapper, Let's do some yapping. Let's make some content together, brother. Good to see you. And thank you for the super chat.
In fairness to Todd Howard and BGS, Coleman's only one side of the story, and we really don't know their reasons for this rug pull as it's described, or if it really went down like that. I've watched dozens of hours of interviews with former Bethesda devs, and I've frankly never seen any of them speak openly like this negatively of their experience.
I want to know why they changed direction. Like, I threw out my own theory that it was a bit of an ego thing. Like, well, we want to be known for more than Fallout and Elder Scrolls. Let's do Starfield instead. In the same way that, like, Bungie wanted to break from Halo and Gearbox wanted to break from Borderlands, and now Bungie wants to break from Destiny. They don't seemingly have a choice. I think they're going to have to make Destiny 3 if they want to survive. But the point is, that's the only theory I can come up with, is why on earth would you switch and make that change, which then leads to broken promises with people that have such a history with the company. Like, you had to know that was going to be tectonic within the culture of the company to not just change direction, but then to break a promise to somebody of such significance. I don't know. I'm really curious where this came from. I'd love to get an explanation of why they made that change.
It's clear a great many of the people who have since left the company are frustrated with what's happened to the workplace culture, the communication breakdowns and whatnot. There's probably some selection bias here. If you leave the company, chances are you have grievances. But they always word it in very polite, very moderated ways where they focus on the positives and really keep their criticisms to the periphery. Coleman...
Well, and here's the deal. Coleman's probably not out here trying to get another job, given how long he's been in the industry. He's probably not. He's also in pretty high demand, I would imagine, given his pedigree. If you're a lower level employee, you've got to be very, very careful. If you walk out into the public and you're like, yeah, that company's run by a bunch of idiots, like you're not going to be considered hireable. You're going to be considered radioactive. So a lot of the times when people come away from a company like this, they're playing the game. They're playing the game. That's why you always want to get the guys that aren't trying to get a job anymore. They're kind of done. You end up getting a lot of the goods, whether it's like Marty from Bungie or in this case, Kurt from Bethesda. It's like maybe they're not really feeling like they need to go out here and shop and get a job like maybe some of the like younger or less seasoned employees. Edward says, Lono, I have a little disagreement. I decided to act my age eventually and give this man my sub again. I heard Stinks was 10 the other day. Where does the time go? Oh my gosh, man. Yeah. Yep, my boy is 10 and my daughter is 12, dude. Time frickin' flies. She's begging for a phone every day.
In no uncertain terms, just says that a big promise was broken and that's why he left. Maybe there's more to the story here. I can say, given that he was offered a different position, it seems highly unlikely that the matter was disciplinary or anything like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they got Hideo Kojima or something. It's also likely that the author of this article is picking out the biggest pieces of intrigue he can get. Very likely that Coleman had many more nice things to say about the company that were excluded from this feature for editorial reasons.
And listen, I would love to see the full interview. I think anytime you do an interview, I believe that there's an impetus on all interviews, unless the person specifically requests to be like, you know what, I'd really like you to not publish that. I got a little loose there, and I don't want that printed. Unless they specifically ask it to not be printed, I think all interviews should be published in their entirety at some point. You want to pull out snippets, you want to pull out headlines, because everybody's playing the game, everybody's trying to get people to click on their stuff. Anybody who says they're not doing that is being more dishonest than the person clickbaiting, okay? Like, oh, I don't do that. Yeah, sure. Everybody's trying to get people to click on their articles, their videos, their tweets, what have you. The entire purpose of these platforms is to get engagement, okay? So I never am going to fault a publication or a YouTuber for grabbing something from an interview to say, okay, this is the spicy nugget right here. We're going to use this to get people to click. I still think there's an imperative on anybody who's ever done an interview to publish that interview in its entirety so that the public can see what was stated, unless the person being interviewed has requested certain things not be publicized. I think that's a fair thing to do. And I think in this case, it'd be really, really great to see the full interview if there's anything else that he said that we could maybe, try to make some deductions or inferences from.
Hopefully, we'll get a follow-up with more information. Thankfully, the interview doesn't end here. Coleman goes on to briefly lay down his vision for what the Elder Scrolls 6 ought to have been. Quote, he even knows what he would have done with the game's story, or at least what he would have liked to do. I had in mind that TES 6 was going to be like The Empire Strikes Back, he says. The Thalmor, the elven supremacists who were peripheral in Skyrim's story and ultimately wanted to control all of Tamriel, would be the bad guys who come out on top, setting up the Elder Scrolls 7.
Remember what I said about you want people in the room who aren't like these postmodern relativists that are going to make everything bland, gray, and boring? This is a guy that knows how to write a good story. He's like, listen, you got to disrupt everything. You got to have a bad guy. You got to sometimes let the bad guy win, right? You got to have that sense of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. That's memorable. That's memorable. Those are some of the best stories. Like, those are some of the most memorable. Like, you without those bright lines, you have no bad guy, you have no disappointment, you have no shock, you have no alarming sort of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that the bad guys come out on top, right? This is a man who understands how to tell a good story and how to create really, really compelling arcs. You can tell just from the way he's already thought this through. I mean, and you're taking inspiration from the greatest Star Wars movie ever made. I mean, so obviously this guy's got not only good ideas, but he's got good taste. So this is unfortunate to say. I mean, this again goes back to what I was saying about having your writers. You have to have writers that understand these elements, because if not, I think you end up with very, very poor writing. I especially in the fantasy realm. You need to have assumed that assumptions about morality and truth. If you don't have those baked in assumptions about morality and truth, I don't think you can tell a compelling story, especially not in a fantasy world where you need heroism and good and evil and moral choices and the impact of those choices, the weight of a choice, that you have to choose who to help, who to save, who to hurt, like whatever. All those things, I think, have so much more potency and impact when you have those things in place. And it's a bummer to have him not on the team and working on this, because this sounds great.
The feature continues. He saw evil triumphing as a welcome alternative to the chosen one idea Bethesda often relied on.
That is I see, and that right there tells me it's like he wanted to get rid of a trope in a good way. Many stories follow similar tropes, okay? Evil triumphing is basically the beginning of every good story. You create the crisis, right? You create the thing that people are going to need to struggle against, which would set up the next game very, very well. Moving away from Chosen One, I think, is perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that Chosen One can't be a great story. I think Chosen One's a common story trope, whether you're, talking about Luke Skywalker, Neo, or Harry Potter. These are common things that you will see in stories. There's a reason for that, right? These are long-standing story archetypes that are linked, I think, to the ultimate story of reality. That's another story for another day, another conversation for another day. But I think pretty much every story archetype pulls from the ultimate story. And I think that's why they're compelling. And I think that's why when you buck up against these things, you don't tell good stories. So I like the idea that he was like, okay, we're going to go to another angle here. Instead of the Chosen One, we're going to go to, evil winning, which is essentially creating the crisis. That's a great story start, which I think that's a great way to have your story end, right? Empire Strikes Back ends with the crisis. The end of Infinity War ends with the crisis. These are memorable. Why? Because you trust and you know that it's going to turn around in the next one, right? Which really makes you want to get into the next game and cheer for the good guys, right? We all cheered and were excited at the end of Endgame and, Return of the Jedi. You cheer for that Death Star getting blown up. I think it's just so unfortunate that this guy isn't working on the next game.
The player might have secretly saved the day at the end of TES 6, he says, for example, by protecting an heir to the throne, so you've preserved hope for the future, but overall, it looks like the Thalmor are on the march.
You see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? How do you not have this guy? He's got a great through line of hope, because the through line of hope at the end of Empire is they're going to go find Han. Like, they're going to go get him. Okay? The through line of hope. You preserved an heir. You kept him in secret. Oh, you're going to be so excited for the next game. How do you let this guy walk out the door? Jiminy Christmas.
Unquote. There you have it, Kurt Coleman, an Elder Scrolls founding father, and, at least at one point, the promised lead designer for the Elder Scrolls 6, laying out his vision for what he would have liked it to look like. Now, I really want to dive into the statement, its implications, and how some other Bethesda developers have lent credence to Coleman's ideas in their own interviews, but first, let's wrap this article up.
This is really important that he's going to do that, because I think it could be very easy to say, this is one guy, he was clearly disgruntled, and now he's kind of doing this like retroactive Monday morning quarterback thing. I think there are other breadcrumbs that lead to this that make it clear there are problems. There are multiple videos we're going to watch today. They're going to be more small snippets where there's a lot of people that are super concerned about the Elder Scrolls 6. So If you guys are enjoying this content, I go out, I find the videos, the clips, the segments to put together kind of a whole live show theme. We don't do this all this often. It's not a variety gaming news show today because the news cycle's a little slow. We're waiting on the GTA 6 from the Take-Two earnings call that happens today in like 5 hours, and we're also kind of waiting on the State of Play and the Nintendo Direct announcements. That tends to make things kind of slow. So if you like these kind of days that help you pass the time, do me a favor and hit like and consider pushing some of those member numbers up with renewals or gifts. Let's go.
He ultimately doesn't think Bethesda would allow an Elder Scrolls game with a bad ending. And with the pace of its releases, a cliffhanger is completely unfeasible, he says. That's not a good way to end a game and say, yeah, we'll see you in 10, 15 years.
I agree and don't agree at the same time. Yo, my man Do Devas is going to slap down a 5-bomb and get us a 93. We're 7 away from 100. That'll put us on pace for yesterday. Love that you're covering the Elder Scrolls. Thank you so much, Do Devas, dude. I appreciate your support. I both agree and don't agree here, okay? At one level, I agree. The games come out so far apart, it would be really, really hard to feel the weight of like, oh, we preserved an heir, even though the game ends on a dour note, we preserved an heir, right? Cat with the VIP bumps a line to 94. Thank you, Cat. It would be really hard to hold on to that for 10 or 15 years. But I also don't agree with them, because I still think that is an adequate ending if you do it right. If you do it right, you would still feel like you achieved a heroic thing. You go in and you sacrifice and you do what's necessary to save this kid, this heir, and then you put him into hiding, right? That ending, I think, could still be extremely memorable and very potent. Yeah, it might get picked up 15 years later, 10 years later. Joker Quinn bumps a line to 95. We are a 5-bomb away from 100. Who's going to steal this one, boys? So, like, I both agree and don't agree. I think they could have pulled this off, even if the conclusion of it or the summation of it or picking the story up again in the future would have taken a really, really long time.
Unquote. The interview finally concludes with a final quote by Coleman explaining that he doesn't even know where in Tamriel the game will be set, joking that his friends who are working on it can't tell him. Bit of a side note here, but assuming he's telling the truth and really doesn't know where the game is set, which I don't believe, I think he's being sarcastic, it would imply that the company hadn't even settled on a setting by the time he left in 2023. An especially grim omen for those of us who have been hoping for a sooner rather than later release. Now, back to Coleman.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have uttered concern about that. That like, well, that means it's really far away. Like they didn't even do preliminaries. I tend to agree with Epic Nate. I think he probably knows where it is and he's being cheeky. I think that's just him being an honorable man. He's not going to give away something that's not his right to give away. Yo, Edward is going to secure it for Twitch. Man, oh man. YouTube set that one up and Twitch steals it. It's now 11-13. We actually have a close race between the platforms today. And I now owe a member to Purple. Thank you so much, Edward, for gifting some members, dude. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, so let's keep watching.
Coleman's idea. A Thalmor victory with perhaps a small undercurrent of hope for the future in the background. On a personal level, I think this is a great idea. Something that ends with an actual defeat would restore a lot to the stakes of the universe and the way they tell stories. It would also let the company evade tough questions about the resolution of Skyrim Civil War. Oh, that? What does that matter? The Empire's in chaos, the legions are smashed, the elves are taking control one way or another.
Well, and I also think something storytellers need to be a little bit more bold and brave about is having an ending or a story that people universally love and praise. You don't necessarily want that. If it's hotly debated and discussed for years and years and years, that's a bit of a feather in your cap. Like, people would spend years debating the end of an Elder Scrolls like that. Like, you know, I think that's a sign of good storytelling, that people are like that invested and they're that plugged into your game that they get on forums and Twitter and YouTube videos for years following and debate the game. We all know that this is true of a particular game that Naughty Dog made. I think Elder Scrolls could have had a similar trajectory of like debate and people talking about it.
Whether Kurt imagines a somewhat linear, unchangeable central narrative like Skyrim, where Alduin is defeated no matter what, or if some degree of player agency in determining a side is allowed, isn't obvious. Clearly, these were ideas he had in his head, which, sadly, may never be realized.
Corey says, I absolutely agree that a cliffhanger in The Elder Scrolls 6 would be horrible because it's so long between games that people may not care by the time they get around to The Elder Scrolls 7, I'm sorry. I think you could do it in a way that works, though, Corey. I really do. I think you could do it in a way that works. I know people would be dissatisfied, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you get people that are that invested, they debate, they cry, they whine, they complain, they moan, that is a feather in your cap. That's you got people. They're rather than a canned, you win. Like, come on. Every story ends that way.
Fellow Bethesda alum and Coleman's co-lead designer and writer on Redguard, Michael Kirkbride, has actually suggested something similar to Coleman's vision. Kirkbride, like his friend, worked on Redguard, did some pre-production work on Morrowind, some contract work for Oblivion, and later temporarily rejoined the company to work on Oblivion DLC under Coleman. It's very clear that the two are close friends. They've got something of a bromance going, and it's easy to imagine the pair staying up late on a long night, bouncing ideas back and forth between each other.
That's not all they were bouncing. I'm just kidding.
Talked about this in my Eye of Magnus video recently, but Michael has literally dedicated short stories to Kurt, and while he left after Oblivion before Skyrim, the two seem to have remained on good terms. One could even envision a world where, if Coleman had gotten his promised lead design gig, his old friend may have had a part to play on the game. I'm kind of riffing here, I'm just putting this together in my head right now, but while Michael Kirkbride is not listed anywhere in Skyrim's credits, he does claim to have been involved in a few conversations about the game's narrative and its systems that would have been difficult to credit. I would not at all be surprised if those early conversations were with the game's co-lead designer, Kurt Coleman. Anyway, while he hasn't formally worked for the company in an official capacity since the Oblivion days, Kirkbride has been a uniquely active contributor in the community, regularly writing little unlicensed short stories, which are technically just fanfiction, and frequently popping into lore discussion threads on forums, even hosting little lore AMAs. One such AMA went down in November of 2013, 2 years after the release of Skyrim, where one user asked the following question, quote, "Would you care to offer some insight on what a more accurate aspiration for the Thalmor's realization of their goals would be, insomuch as it's even possible to write in a sufficiently concise and cryptic manner for an organization that operates on bureaucratically saturated information overload in more or less everything they do?" Kirkbride's response was, "The Thalmor is easily the most dangerous organization in the Orbis, more so than Talos. They cannot be understood. They are the other, and they hate everything that even smells like mortality. And they're going to win in the end."
Yeah, there you go. This guy gets it. He understands. Bright lines, truth, morality. Like, none of this makes any sense without those things. Not to cut you off topic, but did you speak on the Obsidian article? Which one?
Unquote. Now, Kirkbride is somewhat famous for cryptic, undetailed, rambling responses that fail to dive deep into the meaning of questions, and this is no exception to that rule. He just promises an inevitable Thalmor victory. Something that I've always written off, but now, put into the context of Coleman's own statement for his vision, you have to wonder if maybe he was citing earlier conversations with the man who is slated to be TES 6's lead designer. Thalmor lore remains vague and not well fleshed out. Intentionally so. They're clearly a faction of elven supremacists who have brought the Empire to its knees, but whether the faction has a specific cosmic endgame or not remains unknown. Many players have speculated that they seek to uproot the mundus, Nirn, from the laws of reality itself, allowing themselves to return to their ancient primordial beauty. Others predict a more grounded plan to end the human race, but so far, nothing is confirmed. Coleman's insinuation that perhaps the player helps save an heir to the Empire or something is particularly interesting.
It's also interesting that, like, a completely different person almost corroborates the idea that they had a vision for an ending that was going to be not great. Like, the Thalmor were going to win. Like, that's interesting that a completely different guy in a completely different timeline and conversation elsewhere essentially said what Coleman's vision was for the Elder Scrolls 6. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. It seems like maybe they were already cooking up ideas. The worry would be is when you remove people like that or people like that leave, nobody's going to want to pick up the mantle of somebody else's story. You know? Post with the later do Empire planning on my part. Okay, so my daughter's going to be so bummed. She was going to do an event tonight, and it's been canceled.
And somewhat well-precedented, though. Longtime fans, or those of you who have played the remaster, may recall that The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion ultimately ends with the death of the last Septim Emperor, Martin, and the subsequent end of the Dragonborn Septim bloodline. Well, in a 2019 interview at PAX East, Todd Howard actually claimed that one of their original plans for Skyrim was to revolve around a missing, hidden Septim bloodline descendant who had gotten lost in Akavir, returning to reclaim his throne with an army of dragons before the company decided to move in a different direction. In response to a question about theories, Howard said, quote, "I think that they're all good. Like I said there, people want to know truth. But even my perspective is one version of truth of what happened in the history of Elder Scrolls and so forth. I would tamper their desire to have all mysteries revealed, because mysteries are good for a fantasy world to have. What is beyond the ocean? Would you do a game in Akavir? These are things we have thought about. I could sit here and tell you lots about Akavir. Actually, one of the original Skyrim designs had, I think it was Uriel V, returning from it with his army of dragons to retake the throne. But it was sort of like, keep the mysterious lands mysterious. There's enough to do in Tamriel proper. As time goes on, I like to have those elements of mystery or really strange things that you can't wrap your head around."
Yeah, I think functionally that's fair because you have to have what feels like a fog wall out in the distance that you can't see beyond. I think that contains the game to a place in time, and it's okay to have mystery beyond that. Like, we don't really know what's out there. We don't know what these other places look like, feel like, smell like. Like, having that mystery there, I think is completely fine because that's true to what it would be like. Like, that's a genuine representation of what it would be like to live in a time and place like that. There would be lands that were so far from you, you would only have these dim glimmers of rumors about what they're truly like. I think that's completely fine to have mystery and unanswered questions. I think sometimes people want every jot and tittle and every mystery answered, and I think sometimes it's okay to not have that. Like, there are things sometimes you just don't know. And I think that mystery is a part of the lore. It's a part of the cosmology that we talked about earlier. I think that's totally fine. A game can become too big for its own good, right? This is one of the reasons why, like, open world fatigue is happening, because, like, they'll make a game big just for the sake of being big. And sometimes I think, like, what people said about, like, Starfield, like, they could have done, like, 5 planets that were, like, heavily curated and built and handcrafted as opposed to what they did. And I think that kind of speaks to this as well. If Elder Scrolls 6 is, got that fog wall out there on the water, out there in the distance, and there's mystery, and you have this one particular place and this one particular setting that you're really digging in and telling a great story in, you can do that and still have this sense of grandiosity of this big, huge place that you're trying to explore.
Unquote. For those of you who don't know, Uriel V is a character we read about in books from Oblivion and Morrowind. He was an emperor of Tamriel, a Septim bloodline dragonborn, who attempted to invade Akavir with a massive army. But contact was subsequently lost shortly after his departure, and his host was presumed destroyed. Thus his son was crowned emperor and life went on. Bethesda has kept this character and his potential descendants in their back pocket for a while now, and it's very possible that this is what Coleman was thinking about when he suggested saving an heir that leaves hope for the future. Whatever his exact vision, evidently it is not meant to be. I think Bethesda made a giant mistake by letting this guy go. He unironically seems to have been one of, if not the most knowledgeable figure regarding the lore left at the company. Apparently, even while he was working on Fallout 4, 76, and Starfield, the ESO team would constantly field him questions. A lot of ESO lore that gets attributed to Kirkbride's fanfiction stories was likely greenlit by this guy. Back during Redguard's development, he and Kirkbride co-wrote the Pocket Guide to the Empire. That was a physical book that shipped with copies of the game, containing in-depth descriptions of all of Tamriel's provinces and races for the first time. And the lore in that book ended up shaping the setting and stories of every game since. It's just really unfortunate that he had to depart, and we can only hope that Tez 6's event...
Yeah, we got a little glimpse, a little character break there, right? A little a little fourth wall breakage. I like that. Like you could say, he's like, oh, like can you believe that this guy isn't at the company? You know, you passed him over. You decided to do Starfield instead. Jiminy Christmas, what a loss.
Eventual lead designer is as knowledgeable and as enthusiastic as Kurt always was. I really wish there was a more upbeat and positive note I could end this video on. I do take a lot of pride in how generally positive this channel is. You know, a bunch of fun lore investigations, and this video just isn't that. But I think it's information worth getting out there, and I think I'm able to add some context about the roles of the parties involved that I haven't seen in reports elsewhere. Anyway, regularly scheduled programming on this channel will soon resume. I got a couple big long-form videos in the pipeline that I'm working on, and I'm excited to share with you. Hopefully one of them will be ready in the next week or so. Probably closer to 2 weeks, if I'm being honest. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope to catch you all in my next video.
Okay, there'll be a link below if you guys want to watch the original. I'll put a link in chat as well. That was Epic Nate. 13 days ago, he made that video. So be sure to go subscribe to him. His video that he promised in 2 weeks hasn't landed yet. He has 1 day to make good on the promise. So we'll see if he's able to do that. So very, very good video. Let me give you guys the link again. In the chat so that you guys always support the original creator. Throw him a sub. Make sure and check out, you know, if he's got another video coming, you know, that he put a lot of time into. We can kind of talk about this one for a little bit, debrief a little bit, and then I've got some other clips from other people. I think this video kind of set the world ablaze because I really do think that the kindling and the sort of the seedbed for all of this was Starfield, as well as the Shattered Space DLC. Because I do think if you're a Bethesda loyalist, if you've been with them all this time, I really think that probably rocked your confidence. It really kind of broke the foundation a little bit. Like, man, can these guys even do this? Like, are they even able to do the thing that we want? You know, are they going to be able to nail this game or not? You know, I think that's a fair concern to have. You know. And a lot of the videos and clips we're going to watch are really going to dig in on particular things. Like the first thing we're going to look at is Mugthief, a clip of his video. His video is called The Elder Scrolls 6 is in Serious Trouble. And he basically talks about unrealistic expectations. Because I feel like that is definitely in the room as well. Like anytime, and this could be potentially why, you know, they've maybe even wanted to avoid it. You know, do you want to make the game that's going to be the one that just doesn't rise to the occasion and do what everybody's hoping it'll do? You know, are you going to be able to do an Elder Scrolls that feels like the game that people have been wanting and longing for as the continuation of what Skyrim, you know, did for so many people as far as an experience and a memorable, you know, video game? They have got a very difficult task ahead of them. They have a very difficult task ahead of them. I do want to quickly look at a clip, though, a separate subject that's been kind of percolating that I'm very interested in. This has to do with Crimson Desert. Now, somebody mentioned me on Twitter about this, and they said, Crimson Desert dev almost spilled the beans on PS5 Pro's PSSR 2.0 upgrade during the recent interview. They caught themselves mid-sentence. No wonder it skipped the official PlayStation YouTube channel Spotlight big debut reel. It didn't skip the official PlayStation YouTube channel. It literally has a 15-minute video. What are you talking about? That's simply not true. Okay, so this is Will Powers sitting down with Destin. Let me. I want to listen to this.
But TBD on that. We will address all of that before launch.
Well, can you tell me, are there plans to do anything with the PS5 Pro, for example?
Yes, we do have PS5 Pro enhancement. the exact specifications of that will be revealed a little bit more. But we got that little badge on our store page, so I can confirm that there is going to be enhancement for the Pro SKU.
Great. Well, I actually wanted to start with a little bit more of a softball. I wanted to know and just sort of take through the audience the story of it. It's early, so
I don't think that was a slip-up at all. He didn't say anything of significance. And this is simply not true. No wonder it skipped the official PlayStation YouTube channel spotlight. No, it did not. That was my main criticism. The Crimson Desert 15-minute gameplay video is on the PlayStation channel, and it is PC footage, and they don't tell you that it's PC footage until the very, very final frame of the trailer. I do not appreciate that. I think the marketing at this point it feels very misleading, and I don't like how they won't say anything definitively about console. I don't like it. It feels very worrisome. You can tell me you're in the optimization phase, okay? I've had plenty of games at this point before they're coming out speak to what they're targeting. They speak to what they're wanting to do and what they're hoping to get. I do not think that clip is him like almost slipping up about PSSR 2.0. If there is some kind of a PSSR 2.0 implementation and Crimson Desert looks incredible, on the PS5 Pro, that was never something that I was even worried about. I've been concerned about base performance for PS5 and the Series X because there are way more of those people and customers in the market than there are PS5 Pro owners. So if it runs great on the Pro, great. That's never something that I was considering or talking about. So I want to take a listen to what Mugthief here has to say about the Elder Scrolls and unrealistic expectations. This is certainly a part of the conversation as well.
Just shows how Bethesda has stopped thinking of their games as another RPG in a series, as another cool world to explore with a story to tell. Because after Skyrim, that's not what they make. They make giant living worlds with radiant quests, with theoretically infinite content. If you explore so much that there is within Starfield, these are sandboxes for modders to go crazy. These are worlds for people to explore systems that nobody really asked for. And now slowly as they...
A little side note, mad props to him using the ball pit music.
Have built more and more, they need to follow through with every little detail for an Elder Scrolls 6. In their mind, it needs to be huge. It needs to be almost infinite. It needs to have all of the systems that you would expect a modern Bethesda game to have. So probably settlements and weird commerce stuff and radiant bounty hunting and all of these things. The scope and the expectations have ballooned way too big for the studio to actually execute in the way that led to the classics we love.
Well, I think this cuts both ways, by the way. I think this cuts both ways. If you have really big expectations as a consumer, but if they've internalized these massive expectations and they start really, really swinging that, for the fences, essentially, that can also be problematic and troublesome. Like that could basically really hurt the project. I think this cuts both ways. It's not just on the consumer. Sorcerer, thank you for the VIP renewal, getting us to 101. We are now up to pace for yesterday. All right, guys, check those renewals. They count towards our total, so make sure and celebrate those.
To these smaller teams of people that have been with the company for years and are putting their personal touch into every quest and every design. Instead, it's had to evolve into this big corporate structure with big managers that only oversee what other people do and aren't allowed to go hands-on with the project that they probably love more than anybody else. Or at least you would think so, ideally. In a way, it feels like Bethesda is crumbling under their own weight, with more and more projects and with Todd Howard being more occupied by more and more things and probably less hands-on than ever before.
I also think Starfield's playing a role here, like that is a big question mark. Is there a Starfield 2.0? Is there a major Starfield update coming? And if they do that, can they sort of win back some of the confidence? The Bethesda fans are, I think, really rattled at this point. I think they're rattled by what we're hearing. the internal decisions and things. We're going to go to MrMattyPlays here in a moment. Yo, Winged Wheel with the gifted member gets us to 102. Thank you so much, Winged Wheel. You know, Matty really takes issue with some of the choices in the cadence, and it's like that's a very, very, you know, worrisome thing when leadership is making bad decisions, because that cascades through the company. It really, really does.
When we consider the fact that The Elder Scrolls 6 is definitely not coming soon, I would say that my hopes for Elder Scrolls 6 are as low as they could be. And I do want to clarify that I would love for it to be excellent. And I think that a lot of the stuff going on over at Bethesda/ZeniMax is very interesting. And
yo, thank you, Brett, for a member plus. Welcome back. I appreciate you guys so much.
some of the games that you've seen throughout this video come from Xbox themselves. In Exile is working on Clockwork Revolution, and the pedigree of that studio is Wasteland, coming from Fallout. Tim Kaine is back at Obsidian working on a project that he claims none of us can see coming, but Obsidian has also slowly been getting better and better with their experimental projects. While I didn't particularly like Avowed, I thought that The Outer Worlds 2 was considerably better. And there is talent at Obsidian, and more importantly, a willingness to try stuff out. But that's without even beginning to consider the amount of indies out there. Scrolls likes, which share a lot with dungeon crawlers, things like Kingsfield. If you would prefer, you could also think of games like Skyrim as just Kingsfield, but gigantic, are seeing a resurgence. Games like Verho are out there, the upcoming Queen's Domain, which looks spectacular, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, and their expansion is essentially Skyrim in an Arthurian setting, and it is a joy to play through. Wayward Realms wants to continue the legacy of the older Bethesda games. Fatekeeper is a bit of a twist on it with more of a Dark Messiah of Might and Magic flavor.
Did they get Tainted Grail? Like, is it running really good on console, or is it running really well? You like this guy? Yeah, Mugthief is great. He's really, really good. I like the way he speaks. His mic quality is fantastic. I really, really appreciate his content. This is like, I don't know, probably the 6th video I've watched by him. Like, I really appreciate what he brings to the table. I think that was pretty much what I wanted to watch, though. I'll put a link in chat if you guys want to watch the full video. It's a lengthy video. It's like a 19-minute video. We only watch like a couple minutes. He's got really good content, so make sure and sub to him and leave him a nice comment if you watch the rest of the video, because he's basically jumping on the same wavelength that everybody else is jumping on. They're like, man, oh man, none of this sounds good. This is really concerning, especially if you think in the realm of expectations, as he's talking about. Like, the expectations on the game are just enormous. They're enormous. And on the subject of writing, since we watched that piece about, Kurt, this piece from LegacyKillaHD talks about writing and the team, and this is not what you want to hear, okay? Thank you so much for the VIP renewal, Savage Shark. But definitely enjoying these kinds of reactions during the live stream. Thank you so much. Let me add you to the total. If you guys like these kind of reactions, make sure you're subbed to the channel. Make sure your notification bell is set to all. Those notification bells are getting changed. Mag just came in earlier and super chatted and said he wasn't getting noties for the channel all of a sudden. So double check your noties. That is something to do. And then double check your make sure that you've got your membership active as well. We like to see that. We like to see you guys in the Discord as well. We get to connect with you in there for Green Room. So LegacyKill is here. He's going to talk about the writing team, and this is something that I find concerning as well.
Problems, because the technical issues, the engine concerns is one thing, but it's also the writing. Like Starfield, Fallout 4, very much criticized. Even Skyrim had its own issues, especially its main story. But the one thing that people have been talking about is how Bethesda goes about developing their games. This is something that was brought up by YouTuber Kiwi Talks. A lot of people don't realize that Bethesda doesn't actually have any dedicated writers. That is true. They have designers that also do the writing, and this is straight from the horse's mouth. Kurt Coleman, who is the lore master of the Elder Scrolls. And
so right there is, if you don't have him, you don't have the guy doing the cosmology, the origin, the long-standing sort of trajectory for storytelling. You don't have that guy. You got people who are like also writing. I think you can see evidence of that in Starfield, like in spades. I think it's so blatantly obvious that the way they handle writing, that's not going to work if you want a very compelling story. If you want a really, really good Elder Scrolls, you've got to have some good writers, man. You've got to have a dedicated writing team.
And as some people have brought up, this worked years ago, but you're seeing the flaws, especially when you have other AAA developers running laps around them, especially in terms of narrative and choice and all of that. And this is what Kurt Coleman specifically had to say in regards to Bethesda and how they go about writing their games. And it is definitely a concern with the Elder Scrolls 6, especially because Starfield, a game it was heavily criticized with how it went about its narrative, Fallout 4 also, and as I said, Skyrim even before then.
We didn't have writers. I mean, I don't know, but that's still, as far as I know, doesn't have writers. Like we were
narrative design.
We were called quest designers.
Yeah.
And for a long time, that was the only kind of designers there were. There were just quest designers, and then world artists who built the levels. Then I don't remember which project. I think it was maybe Fallout 3 where level design became an official group
Title.
of people that sort of split off from world art. But right up through my time when I left, it was still quest designers. We didn't have narrative designers separate from that. So the quest designers were the people we did the writing, but we also did, I guess, what would be called mission design. And, we wrote the dialogue, came up with the stories, and put it in the game and implemented it.
See, this is why losing him is so significant, because if you have somebody who's doing your quest design, who's also gifted in writing, in thinking through the cosmological systems of a world and its lore and its history, if he's really good at that, he's more than the quest designer, right? He's extending his talents beyond what's being asked of him. So now if you don't have him and those that are left behind, if that's all they really are quest designers, I think that genuinely is a huge concern, because you want, especially in games like this is one of the reasons that when I played Phantom Liberty, I could not go back to Starfield. The writing, the pacing, the characters, the impact of the choices I made when I would go to do a mission or I would go to do a dialogue tree, it was so significantly better and so significantly superior. I think you can see evidence within Starfield of exactly what he's talking about.
The part that we didn't do was build the levels. We didn't put together the world that our stories were taking place in. But we did pretty much everything else to do with, if we're putting together a quest, we would get, if this guy had to walk from here to there and then say something, that's what we would do.
And I do think that you see that flaw with their games. Bethesda, how they go about game development, seems to be very different than a lot of the other developers in this industry, and just writing overall is going to be a concern moving forward. Can they deliver in that area? And that is.
And I think that I'll put a link in chat if you guys want to watch the full video. I wanted to go and grab all these different clips, because that video from Epic Nate. So this is LegacyKillaHD. The video from Nate kind of set all this off. Everybody's now making their own video about all these different things. So he goes and grabs a completely different clip that literally talks about the writers.
Though Bethesda,
and he also here talks about the engine and the bugs.
Does face a lot of problems, and a lot of those problems is just the fact that these launches continue to be disastrous. And it's not even just Fallout 4 started off buggy, Skyrim obviously, and Starfield had its own issues, but it's also these ports and these re-releases. This was just last month we talked about it. Skyrim on Switch 2 shows fans are sick of buggy basic Bethesda ports. You don't even need to say ports, you can just say releases, because this has been the status quo, and it is unacceptable. Bethesda in the past, some of their executives have laughed about this, saying that this is just a reputation and it's just something that you have to understand it's going to be a part of Bethesda. But I don't think that that's acceptable in this year of 2026 now. But unfortunately,
yes, and I think that point is really important. That's why I wanted one more clip from Legacy. It's the same video. Legacy Killa is the same video that I just put in chat. I wanted that other clip there because I think the tolerance that people have for this type of thing is so much lower than it's ever been. It really, really, truly is. This idea, we talked about this before with the idea of Bethesda jank, or it's charming. Nobody's going to think it's charming anymore. Nobody. Not the Bethesda fans, not the potential new fans. Nobody is going to think your jank is charming or funny. Because again, I've got another video here after Matty where the guy talks about how people are going to compare your game to the other games that around it. The games of today are compared to the games of today. You can't bring a game to the market that's like, well, it's got all this jank and all this charm. And it's like, yeah, that was charming back in the day when you guys were like setting an unprecedented level of open world freedom and exploration that nobody had ever really experienced before, unless they had played Morrowind or Oblivion. If they hadn't, which many of us hadn't, it was this completely transformative experience for us to play Skyrim. Patch 1.5 for Tainted Grail saw a 20 plus FPS boost for Xbox, but only 3 on PS5 and PC. Not sure why. Was Xbox lower so the gains were higher, or was Xbox... So is it running better on Xbox now than PlayStation and PC? Like, or was it running significantly worse on Xbox so there was bigger room for gains there? I wasn't paying attention. It performed terribly on my Pro. I couldn't even capture good footage. It was very bad. So I haven't gone back to it. So, you know, the engine is a huge question. The quality is a huge question. And not only that, MrMattyPlays in this clip, he calls into question the cadence and the decision-making that they have made up to this point. That was supposed to be smoother than that.
Of Elder Scrolls. With that in mind, I don't work in the building, and what I'm more focused on as a fan is the release cadence. When I saw the top of this quote here, that Elder Scrolls 6 was supposed to follow up Fallout 4, I think all of us would have said pre-Fallout 4, duh, that makes a lot of sense because Bethesda was just ping-ponging. I know we have the benefit of hindsight 2020, which makes the conversation a lot more complex. We can look at 76 and how terribly that failed at first and go, why would you do that? We can look at Starfield, a new IP, and wonder, why would you have done that? I think 76 is the most obvious one to cross off this list here and go, that probably shouldn't have happened in the first place. I think a lot of the ballooning that has happened at Bethesda is because they need to maintain a live product and they're predominantly a single player RPG studio. I don't think anyone was asking for a live product, a multiplayer product from Bethesda at any time at all. Certainly not now, but definitely even beforehand. And at least at that time, Bethesda was on a good enough roll where we gave them the benefit of the doubt going into 76, but it was so disastrous that it was like a permanent stain on that company's reputation that they still have yet to scrub off, even when 76 is widely accepted. And that's because...
Here's what's interesting about Fallout 76, though. I think this is an interesting development, given that it came out late 2018. They were kind of ahead of the curve. Like, I wonder what prompted them to do this, because that's not enough time for them to be impacted by Fortnite, right? Fortnite comes out late 2017, it takes over the world in 2018, right? I was there at the birth of that. I remember streaming Fortnite. I could get in the top 5 in the directory because it wasn't a popular game in those early days. Like I could go over there in the mornings before I streamed some Destiny, and we could pull good numbers. And then it took over the world, okay? And it impacted a lot of studios to decide to do live service and multiplayer. I'm really curious what led to Bethesda deciding to do this with Fallout. It's very interesting. Historically speaking, they were kind of ahead of the curve. Maybe they saw where things were headed. Maybe they see opportunities. Yeah, maybe it was GTA 5 Online like Madden Mills is suggesting. I mean, maybe they were impacted by another giant game and thought we could bring our own spin on that in our post-apocalyptic world and have something that's very ongoing. The theories that it had to do with Microsoft acquisition and inflating their value before evaluation. So you think as early as when they were building Fallout 76, they were entertaining being acquired? Because Fallout 76 would have been in development, 3 or 4 years minimum before 2018. So you think like 2015, 2014, probably Destiny? Yeah, but Destiny came out in 2014. I mean, that would have been 4 years prior to Fallout 76's birth, which maybe that's enough time. Maybe they saw Destiny and thought we need to do something similar. It's just really crazy to me. I don't know. Something was in the water back then that started to make landfall in games like Destiny and The Division and Fallout 76. The idea that, like, we're going to try and build our game to be online. It could be GTA. It could be other factors. I don't know if they knew they were going to be purchased back when they made these decisions, though.
76, in my opinion, as someone who's played every major update for that game, I continue to go back to it, just doesn't cut it in a lot of ways, man. It's still really mid, unfortunately. And so you look at that being the substitute for Elder Scrolls 6 when you could have had talent like Coleman, maybe even the Smith and so on and so forth, sticking around for this project, and that we could have got what we wanted, but instead we got a live Fallout game that doesn't even fit the essence of what makes a Fallout game really great, which is like the loneliness and the isolation. It's got players running around jumping a mile high because they're mutations and building entire settlements in the middle of nowhere that have like fancy neon lights. It's just,
yeah, online, not every game world translates into online. Elder Scrolls Online did. I'm wondering if it was Elder Scrolls Online, actually. Like, historically speaking, is that what this was? Elder Scrolls Online original release date. When was that? Yeah, 2014. I bet you it was Elder Scrolls Online that impacted the decision. They were like, hey, we took the Elder Scrolls and we translated into an online experience, into an ongoing game. We should do something similar with Fallout. I that wouldn't surprise me at all if that played a role in their decision making there. Maddie's frustration with it is, man, this could have gone different. I can't believe you guys didn't just do 76, but you also did Starfield. He actually continues talking
just
here.
Insane to me, right? And I'm sorry if I'm putting on my Fallout 76 hater cap, but like that substituting Elder Scrolls 6 is unbelievable to me. But I think what you can make at least some sense of is Starfield finding its way into the plans. I think in an ideal world, Bethesda throws Starfield into the 76 slot. We get that game first, and
hang on, your boy says, check my last. I think it was the prevailing thought. Your boy says, wasn't it ZeniMax wanting the Fallout franchise to have their own multiplayer moneymaker like ESO? Yeah, we're on the same wavelength, your boy Chris. I think you and I are on the same wavelength. It just hit me that I was playing ESO. I was streaming ESO on Twitch back then before, and I thought maybe that's what it was. I think you're right. I think that was probably what they saw. Regarding PlayStation 5, we're working really hard on this platform, but these issues we're facing mostly come from how Unity handles graphics on PS5. Okay, so yes, thank you, Jakob. So Tainted Grail is running markedly worse on PS5 compared to Xbox. That's really unfortunate. That's like a game I was considering maybe giving another shot.
Then after that, we get Elder Scrolls 6 by the time Starfield was originally coming out. So you have like a 2018 Starfield and a 2023 Fallout 76. This is in a perfect world where I'm playing manager mode. I'm taking all the pieces on the chessboard and I'm moving them around as if it's that easy. Obviously, we saw Starfield come along in its development from its leaks to its first showcase to a showcase in 2023 where it did look a lot better on the visual department. Like, it's clear the game needed more time, especially if leaks were to be believed that by like 2021 this was a completely broken video game. But I think you could justify in your head, even with hindsight 2020, Starfield making some sense in the company's plans. Like, hey, we don't want to ping pong back and forth, let's try something new. That gets into the whole section of design decisions Bethesda made that just weren't good, that made these projects so bloated, that demanded the team size that they have right now, which is like 400 plus people.
So now he's touching on things we've already kind of touched on. I like Matty. I think it's a great video. If you guys want to watch the whole video, I'll give you the link to the whole thing. I think him kind of calling into question the decision making is fair. I think this gets back to what we were talking about. Was it ego? Was it hubris? Was it this idea that like we don't want to be known as just Elder Scrolls and Fallout guys? Like, we want to be known for more. I think that played a role here. I think it really did. I think they thought, we want to be known for more than these things, and that's why they pivoted to Starfield. Fallout 76 was a planned DLC for Fallout 4. Oh, okay, it was allegedly a planned DLC. I did not know that. Bloomberg interview with Obsidian. The Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed failed to meet sales expectations. Grounded 2 was a big hit. No plans for third Outer Worlds. Microsoft 30% profit target for many Xbox studios led to putting games on PlayStation. So this is coming out of a Bloomberg article that Hazador is giving a summary of here. I don't know if we'll be able to read this or not. Yeah, we'll read this in a second. This is certainly related to the topic of Bethesda and Elder Scrolls. I got one more thing I want to look at with you guys. AVV Gaming has they've got almost 25,000 subscribers, so they're nearing a very, very big milestone. And this video has 83,000 views, so good for them. It went up a month ago. Is Elder Scrolls 6 too late? And I really liked what he had to say here. I have it muted.
On really does make you worried. Add to this, most of the audience they had have moved on. I recently met a 20-year-old who asked me about my YouTube channel. When I said that I cover games like Skyrim, he replied, "I've never heard of that, but I love Elden Ring." That says everything. Older fans like me will play The Elder Scrolls 6 out of nostalgia. Younger players won't. They won't compare it to Skyrim, they'll compare it to modern RPGs. We saw this with the Oblivion remaster. Nostalgia carried it for long-time fans, but newer players found it dated and didn't understand the hype. The gaming world has moved on since the last Elder Scrolls. Emil can ask for patience, but the industry won't wait. Technology advances, standards rise, and expectations change.
He's basically interacting with, there's somebody who gets quoted quite a bit, Emil. Emil, I believe is how you pronounce it, is somebody that people are very concerned about being attached to the project. There were a lot of quotes, there were a lot of things stated that fans of Bethesda, fans of Elder Scrolls and Fallout, they basically don't want that person close to the project. And I think that was so well stated. I loved his testimonial there, that like people of today will compare this to games from today. I'm putting a link in chat if you guys want to support AVV Gaming. Just a very quick snippet from a very good video. So I'm trying to whet your appetite with some of these. I don't want to be a replacement for everybody's video. Epic Nate's video had like 1 million views. We're not serving her as a replacement, right? Somebody like this really put the time in. He's got 83,000 views. You want to watch his whole video. I think it's well worth watching. I loved that section, though. I love the section, the idea that the world has moved on. People are going to think about games in the realm of Elden Ring. They're going to think about games in the realm of, Baldur's Gate and other games. That's how they're going to view these games. They're going to view them through that lens. And if you are not at that level, you are 100% going to feel like you're playing something that is from another time, This guy says, I said my most disappointing game this year was Hellblade 2, and this guy says, we try hard to avoid real disappointment this gen because it's effed up, but I'm okay to talk about it. Oh, wait, never mind. You have to White Knight for PlayStation. And he puts a picture of Concord. Here's the thing. Concord can't be my biggest disappointment this gen because I don't like games like that and wasn't looking forward to it. I know it's hard to understand that when you're White Knighting for your platform, but like, I literally found Hellblade 2 to be the most disappointing game this gen because it was one that I was looking forward to. I wasn't looking forward to Concord at all. I called it bad from moment one. People like that don't engage with my content at all. Jiminy Christmas. Like, I know it's hard to see a game from your favorite company be described as a disappointment. I mean, I don't know. That's like just bedwetting in the public, I guess. Okay, so this is from Bloomberg. Inside Xbox, a game studio is trying to reinvent itself, all right? Every week, Fergus Urgahart, the head of Obsidian Entertainment, meets for breakfast with his management team at a diner near their office to scarf cinnamon rolls and make decisions about the video game studio's future. They've had a lot to discuss in recent gatherings. Last year, the developer released 3 games, a rare, impressive achievement for a studio of its size, but 2 of them failed to meet sales forecasts set by Obsidian's parent company, Microsoft. They're not disasters, he says. I'm not going to say this was a kick in the teeth. It was more like, that sucks. What are we learning? Okay, so a day before one of the breakfast gatherings, he was sitting with a Bloomberg Business Week reporter in a conference room of Obsidian offices in Irvine, California. Pleasant hunt from okay, this is a bunch of fluff. Let's get to the meat here. Since it was acquired in 2018, Obsidian has been prolific, releasing half-dozen titles, including last year's Trio, the trippy fantasy role-playing game Avowed, the survival game Grounded 2, and the dystopian sci-fi RPG The Outer Worlds 2. While Grounded 2 was a big hit, the disappointing results from the other 2 have led Obsidian to think a lot about how much we put into our games and how much we spend on them and how long they take. I was having fun in The Outer Worlds 2. Okay? I was having fun. I did not enjoy Avowed. I thought Avowed felt janky. I thought Avowed felt very dated. I did not think Avowed felt like a modern game. It felt like a game from a long time ago. Problem with Outer Worlds 2 is it also had something about it that was very dated in that it didn't run very well. It felt like a game that just didn't understand how to build itself within the modern landscape. And even when they pushed out an update that allegedly made it run smoother, I still felt like it looked pretty bad. So, I think they need to look long and hard in the mirror to make sure they're not doing the same thing that we were just talking about Bethesda doing, which is basically incorporating cobwebs into the scheme of your game design. Like, you've got to do better if you want games like to land these days. There's so many games. There is just an ocean of games coming out. You cannot come out and be so-so or mediocre. You just can't. Both Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2 were in development for more than 6 years, inflating their production costs and the company's financial expectations. It's another reason why when games are in development that long, Microsoft's expectations about margins are just unreasonable. One of the missions was to cut down development timelines to 3 to 4 years per title. This is ridiculous. 3 to 4 years per title, if you're building something like Avowed or The Outer Worlds 2, I think that's completely unreasonable. This right here, okay, one of his missions is to cut down development timelines to 3 or 4 years per title. I'm curious where that's coming from. Is that coming from Microsoft? I've talked about this before. Microsoft and Disney are very similar. They want cadence over quality. That's something that they champion. And if he was told, you need to cut your development timelines down to 3 to 4 years per title, I think that's absurd. I don't think you're going to get good games from studios like this that build games like The Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed. You're not going to get those games in 3 to 4 years. If that's their mission and their goal, listen, they didn't build compelling, good, high-quality games in 6 years. What the heck do you think they're going to do in 3 to 4? Jiminy Christmas. That's a recipe for failure. Why would you do that? Sometimes in the gaming industry, things need to change. Expenses are swelling, growth is stalling. Almost every game maker is facing questions about how to survive. Tens of thousands of workers have lost their jobs. Urquhart was the producer. The former publishing entertainment games were so cheap that to build a single hit could take up for half a dozen flops. Can make up for half a dozen flops. But since then, the average cost of a project has ballooned from 7 figures to 9, so missing a target can be fatal. Obsidian appears to be on relatively firm ground. For divisions of Xbox, sales are just one part of the equation, and RPGs tend to gain sales momentum over time. Obsidian's games get respectable reviews from critics and sometimes win awards, helping to sell Xbox hardware, and they're offered on Xbox Game Pass, the company's Netflix-like subscription service. Quote, Obsidian develops games that are central to our vision for reaching more players than ever before, said Mary McWayne, a general manager for Xbox Game Studios. She wrote in an email statement adding that the developer, quote, demonstrates a creative excellence and range that continues to strengthen the Xbox portfolio. This is corpo speak. This doesn't mean anything to me. Anytime Microsoft speaks about their studios, all I hear is a buzzing sound. Besides, Urquhart is accustomed to operating under precarious circumstances. He founded Obsidian in 2003 with a handful of colleagues from Interplay, which had just been delisted from the NASDAQ and was on the verge of going bankrupt. Obsidian was privately held for many years, juggling contracts from large publishers and developers for games of Star Wars, Fallout, South Park, and other franchises. It found a devoted fan base for its complicated, though sometimes glitchy RPGs with deep storylines, and would change on the basis of player decisions. But the studio was always 1 or 2 bad contracts away from going under. In 2012, when Microsoft canceled one of its big projects, a fantasy multiplayer game called Stormlands, Obsidian had to lay off staff and almost collapse before turning to a Kickstarter campaign to keep afloat. A few successes later, Urquhart and his co-founders were in talks to sell the business to the company that almost killed it. During the negotiations, yeah, that's like Thanos. What does your failure bring you? Back to me. During the negotiations with Microsoft, Obsidian executives assembled a slideshow presentation for a concept that would become Avowed, pitched as an ambitious cross between the Elder Scrolls Skyrim and Destiny that would allow players to battle monsters together in a massive fantasy world. This is what they pitched. Okay. It was an impressive and unlikely proposition. My thought when I first saw this was, I don't think there's a team on the planet that could execute on this, says Josh Sawyer, Obsidian Studio Design Director. 2 years later, Obsidian stripped out the multiplayer feature, and a year after that, it assigned a new director to the project. By the time Avowed came out, it had been in work for nearly 7 years. I think this just speaks to what Avowed turned into. I don't think that they had a vision for the game long enough for it to become anything. I think a lot of those 7 years was probably spent completely restructuring the game. In 2019, just after the Xbox purchase, Obsidian released The Outer Worlds, a sci-fi game by the creators of Fallout that attempted to capture the spirit of their old game's jagged satire. It was a surprise hit, selling 5 million copies, and Obsidian went to work on a sequel. Hampered by the pandemic and technological challenge, the second game took longer than expected. I don't think anybody really likes 5, 6, 7 year dev cycles, says Brandon Adler, director of Outer Worlds 2. We've kind of grown into that. Yeah, nobody likes it, but listen to what he said. This is emerging from the reality of what it takes to build these games, which is if you're trying to build these games in 3 to 4 years, all I have to say is good luck. Grounded 2 came together the quickest despite the popularity of the original, which the studio released during the pandemic and the gaming boom of 2020. Obsidian had not planned on greenlighting a sequel until it got a pitch in early 2023 from Eidos Interactive, a studio in Montreal that was looking for outsourcing work. That the 3 games were already in 2025 was mostly a coincidence. Releasing them all in one calendar year made for slick marketing beat that the year of Obsidian, as Xbox called it, but it also taxed the studio's resources. The group has around 280 employees. Only 280? Jiminy Christmas. How are they, with that many employees, how can you possibly expect to deliver games like Outer Worlds and Avowed in 3 to 4 year timelines? That is absurd. Far fewer than peers like Baldur's Gate, Larian Studios 500, Cyberpunk CD Projekt Red with 1,300. Obsidian support teams were stretched thin, with frazzled staff leaping frantically from one game to the next. Quote, spacing those releases helps the company manage its resources and not burn everybody out, Sawyer says. It's not good to release 3 games in the same year. It's the result of things going wrong. The other question you have to ask here is, we've got 2 things in the room. We've got somebody saying that their goal was to get these games out in 3 to 4 years, which is ridiculous. And we also released 3 games in the same year, and it stretched them very, very thin. And Avowed was not ready when it shipped. It had jank and glitchiness, and I don't think it reviewed very well. Outer Worlds 2 had glitches and bugs and didn't run very well. This right here all smells like Microsoft to me. All of this smells like Microsoft. Get those games out. Yeah, all in the same year? Yeah, we don't care. We don't care what it does to your studio. We don't care what it does to support. We don't care what it does to your very small staff of 280 employees. Get them out. And they ship and they're not ready. This all smells like Microsoft. Shrinking dev windows to 3 to 4 years and pushing 3 games out in the same year, 2 of which were not at quality and had issues. Like, Phil Spencer talked about shipping games once per quarter at quality, and they basically made Obsidian ship out 3 games in a year, and 2 of them were not at quality and had performance issues and needed to be patched after the fact. Grounded 2 offers some lessons for a better way forward. Obsidian assigned a few senior staff to orchestrate the production in Montreal from 3,000 miles away rather than develop the whole thing in-house. And not surprising, Grounded 2, I think, landed stronger than the others because look at what they did. They weren't the ones that had to build it if they outsourced it. Chris Parker, an Obsidian co-founder who supervised development, says the distance was empowering because he could make hard calls more swiftly. One of the game's vehicles, rideable insects called buggies, had originally been designed to be shared by multiple players until Parker and his crew realized the functionality wasn't coming together, leading them to pivot. I was like, if this was one of the internal teams, he'd have to work on this for another 2 or 3 months. We made this call because we could tell them what to do. It feels like we could still run around with our kid gloves on internally. Quicker decisions could help Obsidian shorten development times, as could more outsourcing, which the company is already embracing. Another shortcut, according to Urquhart. The team plans to more frequently reuse technology on projects instead of, say, building new animation systems for each game. For Fallout New Vegas, Obsidian used art and technology from the predecessor Fallout 3 New Vegas, which ended up costing $8 million, a relative bargain, and it took less than 2 years to make. We don't need to change everything every time, Urquhart says. We've had this debate internally. Do people really care that we spend an extra 100-person months on the inventory screen? And see, this is just good, like, logistics, like, just reuse what's working, like, you don't got to rebuild everything. In recent years, Urquhart has been grooming 2 lieutenants, Justin Britch and Marcus Morgan, to take over the business when he retires. Last year, Britch, 33, and Morgan, 36, gave a talk at the DICE Summit Las Vegas called Obsidian's 100-Year Plan that detailed their philosophy, retaining as many staff members as possible, avoiding unchecked headcount growth, pursuing moderate success, and not chasing trends. Yeah, this is how you survive, I mean, if we're honest. Don't chase trends, don't mushroom up too large, and keep your talent. That's going to be really hard to do if Microsoft is telling you to ship games every 3 to 4 years, and they just stretched you thin this year, or last year, to make sure that you guys could ship 3 games in the same dadgum year. I mean, good luck with those aims. I think those are noble, and those are basically how you survive. But I continue to think that Microsoft is going to be a spoke in the wheel for so many of these studios. Rather than focusing the entire studio on a single game, they like to juggle multiple projects at once. Still, that's eluded many other developers, but the Obsidian has mastered. You need to keep having at-bats, because at some point, if you can consistently make good stuff, you'll get some breakout hits. Thank you, Zyber, for 21 months over there on Purple. I greatly appreciate it. Britch recently found a book in Urquhart's office about what to do in retirement. I didn't buy it, Urquhart insists with the laugh, but the CEO says he's not ready to pass the crown just yet. They're still babies, he jokes. As Justin and Marcus become more ready, they'll just start doing more and more stuff. Yeah, Yeah, I've read enough. I'm good. The rest of it's probably going to be about not what I really was concerned about. I'm concerned about, like, okay, so what's the goal going forward? If they're going forward is to maintain talent and not mushroom up. But if you're trying to get games out every 3 to 4 years, that just spells trouble. That just spells trouble. That's not a recipe for success. That sounds like the thing that I've talked about for so long, you know? So, all right, we're going to go ahead and call it early because I've got some things I need to do, and so I can't go as late today, and the news cycle is basically in a holding pattern for GTA 6 and Take-Two's earnings call anyway, and that's what I wanted to do today. I wanted to look at all those things. That article came a little bit late, so we're going to go ahead and head to Green Room. Hit like on the way out. If you guys are a member or a sub over there on Purple, you can come to the Green Room. It takes place in the Discord. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel so much. I will see you guys in the Discord in just a moment.